Hey everyone, watching Paranormal M. How's it going where you are? Let me know what the weather's like where you live. Over here, it's been a mix of chilly and sunny days lately. It's not exactly perfect, but I'm still really happy just to be here sharing my paranormal experiences with you. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll be the first to catch the newest videos. Good night. So, not too long after that strange thing with my oldest boy accidentally recording something in his room, something started happening with my younger son, Mason. He was about 4 at the time, maybe just a little older. There were several nights when I'd wake up out of nowhere to the sound of him screaming, not just crying, but truly terrified. His room was on the main floor, right near his older brother's, and my bedroom was all the way upstairs. So every time it happened, I'd be flying down the stairs in the dark with my heart pounding. Most nights, by the time I got to him, he was still kind of half asleep. I'd sit beside him, calm him down, tuck him back in, and by morning, he wouldn't remember much. I kept telling myself it was probably just nightmares, maybe night terrors, the kind of thing little kids go through. But there were 2 nights that felt completely different. One night, I rushed in and found him sitting straight up in bed, crying hard, fully awake. I climbed onto the bed, held him close, and asked him what was wrong. He looked right at me and said, "There's a demon in my room." I can still remember the feeling that hit me when he said that. My stomach just dropped. I asked him what he meant, hoping maybe I'd misunderstood, but he just kept repeating it, getting more upset each time. Then he told me something that honestly still turns my stomach when I think about it. He said the demon was lifting his head off the pillow and then dropping it back down. He described it so clearly, like it wasn't just some blurry dream. He kept saying it had happened again and again. And then he told me it was standing in the corner of the room. Of course I looked. I checked the corner, I looked everywhere, but there was nothing there. What made it even harder to brush off was that it didn't just happen once. It happened again. And after that, he would bring it up during the day too, not only in the middle of the night. Over the following weeks, maybe even a couple of months, he kept describing the same thing every time. The demon, the corner of the room, and his head being lifted and dropped back onto the pillow. I know children can have vivid dreams and night terrors. I know that. But the way he described it, and the fact that he talked about it later in broad daylight, when he was calm and fully awake, that really stayed with me. It shook me in a way I still can't fully explain. Hey, I've gone back and forth on whether to share this, because even saying it out loud still feels unreal. But it stayed with me for years, and I can still picture it so clearly. This happened sometime around the late 2000s or early 2010s. I was probably somewhere between 9 and 11. We were at this ordinary neighborhood park, the kind with a baseball diamond, a walking trail through a patch of trees, and some construction happening off to one side. Near the trail, there was this big round concrete tank or basin sitting by itself. It was the middle of the day, overcast but bright enough to see everything clearly. Nothing felt creepy or unusual. I was there with my mom, just walking like normal. A couple of older ladies were ahead of us on the path, and they passed that concrete structure without reacting at all, like there was absolutely nothing strange there. Then, when my mom and I got to that same spot, I turned my head to the right for no reason I can explain. And that's when I saw it. There was something hovering just above the concrete tank, not standing on it, hovering. It was sitting cross-legged in midair. The figure looked almost human at first glance, but not really. Its skin was this deep bluish color, but not flat or solid. It had this strange layered quality, like there was movement underneath it, almost like light shifting underwater. I remember blinking, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, and then realizing it had 4 arms. Its eyes were yellow, sharp, and fixed directly on me the moment I noticed it. It wore something that looked like a robe or cloak in blue and gold, but the patterns on it wouldn't stay still. They kept subtly shifting, not wildly, not like it was flickering in and out, just enough that every time I tried to focus on one detail, it seemed to rearrange itself. And the second we made eye contact, everything changed. The sounds around me dropped away like someone had turned the world down. The park was still there, but distant. My ears started ringing. My body suddenly felt heavy, like moving would take too much effort. I remember thinking I should step back, or say something, or do anything at all, but I just stood there. And the weirdest part is, I wasn't afraid. Not calm exactly, but not scared either. Just completely locked in. I could hear my mom saying my name, Mara, but it sounded far away, even though she was right beside me. Then she said it again, and this time it sounded closer, like I was surfacing out of something. And then all at once, everything came rushing back. The sound, the feeling in my body, all of it. My mom grabbed my arm and pulled me forward, and we moved fast down the trail. I looked back one time. It was still there, hovering in the same spot, watching. It didn't look angry. It didn't look welcoming either, just completely still, calm, like it had been there long before we noticed it, and would still be there after we left. I barely talked about it for years. Then, a few years ago, I mentioned it to my mom out of nowhere, and to my surprise, she remembered it too. She told me she thought about it for a long time afterward, but eventually shoved it out of her mind because it unsettled her so much. I've never had another experience like that, nothing even close. What I still can't stop thinking about is that shift when we locked eyes. The muffled sound, the ringing, the strange heaviness, like time bent for a moment. I should probably start by saying I'm 39 now, and all of this has unfolded over roughly the last 25 years. When I was a kid, my mom used to test what she called my intuition. She'd hold up playing cards and ask me to guess them. A surprising amount of the time, I'd get either the number or the suit right. At first, it felt like a game, but over time, it started to feel like something more than that. As I got older, I began noticing things in the corners of my vision. Little movements, shapes that didn't make sense. The kind of thing you almost brush off until it keeps happening. Eventually, there was this presence I became so used to that I would actually say goodnight to it almost every night for several years. Friends hated sleeping over at my house. They all described it differently, which somehow made it feel even stranger. One would say it felt like something heavy was pressing on their chest. Another would say they just felt deeply uneasy, like they were being watched, and they could never fully relax enough to sleep. When I was about 18, I started trying to have out-of-body experiences. One night, I came incredibly close. I remember feeling this strange lightness, like I was peeling away from myself. And when that final sensation at the top of my head seemed to slip free, I panicked and snapped right back into my body with my heart pounding. That was around the time I think I had my first real encounter with what people might call a shadow figure. A few nights later, I fell asleep and felt like something was pressing down on my chest, crushing me. In the dream, or whatever it was, I remember shutting my eyes tightly and counting to 3 so I could force myself awake. Since then, there have been a lot of other experiences. Even now, completely awake and completely sober, I still catch figures out of the corner of my eye almost every day. Sometimes they seem to peek around doorways. Sometimes they dart past. Sometimes they look more like dark wisps or a blur of smoke that vanishes the second I focus on it. One of the clearest moments happened not that long ago while I was working from home. My bathroom sits at an angle from my office, and from the mirror beside the sink, I can actually see part of my desk and computer. One morning, around 10, I glanced into that mirror and saw what looked like a shadow person, about 6 feet tall, just standing there. I looked away, then back again. I blinked, stared, tried to make sense of it, but it was still there. Then I turned and saw it directly, not just in the reflection, and it drifted off to the right toward the window and disappeared. Things have been quieter since then, at least compared to before. But a couple of weeks ago, I saw what looked like a dark arm reach around the edge of the wall and tug at a hanging cable hard enough to make it swing. At this point, I don't know exactly what I'm asking for. I just know it feels like something has been around me for a long time, and I've never really been able to understand what it is. I'd just like to make some kind of sense of it. I've believed in the paranormal for as long as I can remember. Even when I was little, I was the kind of kid who would happily curl up and watch every ghost show I could find. I was completely fascinated by all of it. Over the years, I've had a handful of experiences that stuck with me, but this one has never left me. This happened when I was a teenager, probably around 14 or 15. My mom and I had gone with my extended family to Newport, Rhode Island, and we were staying at my aunt's timeshare, a place my family had been visiting for years. It was one of those familiar family spots that felt lived in and safe, which honestly makes what happened feel even stranger. My younger cousin, Mason, and I were sharing a room at the end of a short hallway. If you walked into the condo, you'd go straight down the main hall, turn right, and our room was the only one there. It felt a little tucked away from the rest of the place. On the second night, Mason was snoring so loudly that I couldn't fall asleep. I know for a fact I was awake. I kept shifting around in bed, turning one way and then the other, trying to get comfortable. At one point, I ended up lying near the foot of the bed, just staring across at him, annoyed because I'd already tried to wake him enough to get him to roll over and stop snoring. I remember rolling my eyes and turning my head, and that's when I saw someone standing at the end of my bed. At first, all I noticed were the legs. They were wearing fishnet stockings. Then, as I pulled myself back toward the headboard, I saw more of the figure. A dark skirt, long reddish curls falling past the shoulders, and the outline of a tall person standing there with one hand on their hip. What made it so horrifying was that I couldn't really see their face. The room wasn't pitch black. There was light coming in through the window behind them, enough that I should have been able to make out details. But instead, most of their face and part of their body looked swallowed in shadow, almost flat and black, like the light just stopped where they were. And they were facing me. Just standing there, still, as if they were watching me. I was absolutely frozen. I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't even look away. I just stared. Then I did the most cliché thing possible. I yanked the blankets over my head, counted as steadily as I could, and finally forced myself to look again. They were gone. The second I realized that, I practically dragged Mason out of sleep. I didn't even try to be quiet. I called his name loudly enough to wake him up, and I made him turn on the TV because I was too terrified to sit in the dark. He was half asleep and irritated, but he did it, then rolled over and went right back to sleep. I didn't sleep at all after that. I stayed awake the rest of the night with the television on, just waiting, listening, watching. Nothing else happened, not that night and not for the rest of the trip. But I have never forgotten that figure. Out of everything I've experienced, that was the clearest, the strongest, and easily the most unsettling. Even now, I can still picture exactly how they looked standing there at the end of my bed. So, I've gone back and forth for years about whether to even tell this story, because the truth is, I still don't have a neat explanation for what happened. Even now, thinking about it gives me this weird, uneasy feeling. I'm not saying it was something paranormal. Not for sure anyway. But I know it wasn't normal. And I know I didn't imagine it, because my girlfriend at the time, her name was Marissa, saw it too. This happened when I was 18, a little over a decade ago. Back then, we lived in a second-floor apartment, and from our bedroom window, you could see straight into the building across from us. It was one of those older apartment blocks, maybe 3 stories tall, with rows of windows facing ours. For a couple of weeks before the main thing happened, Marissa kept waking me up in the middle of the night, telling me she saw something strange in one of the windows across the street. She'd be genuinely shaken, and I'd always brush it off. I was a deep sleeper, and honestly, I just didn't want to deal with anything creepy at 2 in the morning. I'd mumble something half awake, tell her it was probably nothing, and we'd go back to sleep. But then one night, something happened that made me start paying attention. I'd just bought this new glass pipe earlier that day, one of those novelty ones with a reggae design on it. Right before bed, I packed it and stood by the window for a minute. And out of nowhere, the pipe felt impossibly heavy in my hand. I don't mean slippery or awkward, I mean heavy, like somebody had suddenly swapped it for something solid and weighted. It dropped straight out of my fingers and shattered on the floor. I just stood there, staring at the broken glass and everything spilled out around it. I remember feeling frozen, like something was wrong in a way I couldn't explain. I didn't even look back out the window. I just locked it, cleaned up enough to ignore it, and went to bed with this awful feeling in my chest. A few nights later, around 3 in the morning, Marissa and I were walking back from my brother-in-law's place, which was in the back of the property. We were climbing the stairs to our apartment when she suddenly told me, really quietly, to look over. At first, I barely glanced. I figured it was just people hanging out late, maybe some kind of party in one of the apartments across the way. Nothing unusual. But then I looked again, really looked, and my stomach dropped. What I saw were figures, but not people. They were completely black, darker than the room around them, like shadows except solid somehow. They were moving in this stiff, unnatural, side-to-side rhythm, almost like dancing, but not in any way a real person would dance. Their arms were raised at these sharp angles, jutting up from where their shoulders should have been, except it didn't even look like they had necks or real heads. No faces, no features, just these impossible shapes. One of them had this bent body that looked almost zigzagged, like it had been folded the wrong way. 2 others seemed fused together. One leaned forward in front of the other, but both still swaying in that same rigid, mechanical motion as the rest. There were colored lights flashing in the room, red, green, blue, like cheap party lights, but the light didn't hit them. That's one of the parts I still can't get over. It was like the colors moved around them instead of landing on them, like they weren't really part of the room at all. What made it even stranger was that the windows around that apartment looked normal. Above them, there was a man pacing back and forth while talking on his phone under this dim yellow light. In another nearby window, a guy was sitting down reading, completely calm, same warm yellow light. At first, that almost made me question what I was seeing. Then, everything changed. Because both of us felt it at the exact same time. Those things knew we were watching. They didn't stop moving. They didn't turn to face us. But somehow, unmistakably, we felt their attention lock onto us all at once. It's hard to describe unless you've felt something like that before. It was like standing in front of a huge room full of people right before speaking. That crushing pressure in your chest. But darker, heavier, pure dread. Marissa grabbed me and we ran inside. We were only outside for maybe 10 seconds after noticing them, maybe 15 at the most, but it felt longer. We rushed into the apartment, went straight to the window, and looked back out. And they were gone. The figures, the movement, all of it. Gone. The colored lights were still flashing in the room like nothing had happened. The yellow-lit windows nearby looked completely ordinary. It was like the whole thing had just been erased. For a long time after that, I was genuinely scared. I read everything I could, trying to find anything that matched what we saw. Shadow people, dimensional stuff, visual distortions, anything. The closest idea I ever found was that maybe they were some kind of shadow beings, and the normal-looking people in the neighboring windows were just part of whatever disguise or illusion was happening. But honestly, I don't know. I still don't know. All I know is that it was real enough for both of us to see it, and real enough that I still think about it all these years later. And even now, it still gets under my skin. So this started a couple of years ago, when I turned the spare bedroom in our house into a little office and craft space for myself. It became my spot almost immediately. I'd sit in there for hours doing school assignments, working on little art projects, writing letters, or just watching something to unwind. And not long after I settled into it, I started getting this strange feeling that I wasn't alone. It was like being watched. At first, it didn't feel fully hostile, just present. Heavy, maybe. I tried to ignore it because I grew up being told that if you acknowledge that kind of thing, you give it more power. So I kept my head down and acted like nothing was there. But honestly, I think the effort it took to ignore it only made me more aware of it. After maybe a year of using that room, the feeling changed. It got darker somehow, more intense, and it didn't matter what I was doing in there. I could be focused on homework, making something with my hands, watching a movie, anything at all. The moment I got too absorbed and let my guard down, I'd feel it again, stronger than before. And even though I never really saw it in the usual sense, I started to know exactly what it looked like. It's like my mind could map it out from pure instinct. A tall, black shadow figure in the corner near the door. So tall it seems bigger than the room itself, like it has to hunch slightly just to fit under the ceiling. Not moving, never stepping forward, just fixed there in that corner, as if it's part of the wall. Flat in a way that's hard to explain, almost not fully solid. And all it ever does is stand there and watch me. Just me. It's never thrown anything, never made noise, never done any of the dramatic things people usually talk about. It's quieter than that. Worse, in some ways. It just stands there with this constant attention on me, like it's waiting, like it wants a reaction. I stopped spending time in that room around a year ago. Not because I was panicking or terrified to walk in, but because I got tired. Tired of feeling drained. Tired of that sensation at the back of my neck, like something was right behind me, breathing there, studying me. And sometimes, it doesn't even seem to stay in the room. I'll feel it in the hallway now and then, or when I step into the laundry area and reach for the light. Still never in front of me, never off to the side, always behind me, always just out of sight, but unmistakably there. Then last night, for the first time, it showed up in my sleep. Before bed, I'd been reading about witchcraft history, mostly the way it connects to women and folklore and all of that. I had a few books open online, added some to my cart, and watched a video about making protective bells for the home. Right in the middle of that video, the bathroom light started flickering. That light stays on at night for practical reasons. The porch light stays on outside, and the bathroom light stays on inside so nobody has to stumble around in the dark half asleep. The bulbs aren't even that old, maybe a year or so, and they've never flickered before. But this was strange. When I paused the video, the flickering stopped. When I pressed play, it started again. Pause. It stopped. Play. It flickered. Eventually, I turned the video off completely and went to bed, telling myself it had to be some weird coincidence. Then around 6 in the morning, when my first alarm went off, I woke up from something that didn't feel like a normal dream at all, and it looked back. What really stayed with me was that I wasn't terrified. I wasn't frozen either. I just felt calm. Blank almost. Completely neutral. And as I kept staring at it, I could finally make out a face, or something like one. It was wearing a gray plague doctor mask. Not exaggerated, not theatrical. Just a plain, old-looking mask with a normal-length beak and these deep, black, endless eyes. That part is what I can't stop thinking about. Why is it so interested in me? I've never spoken to it, never confronted it. I've walked past that corner plenty of times, sure. I've talked about it, but I've never invited it in, never challenged it, never reached toward it in any way. A few other details might matter, I don't know. I collect crystals and old little trinkets, but I'm careful about what I bring home. I only keep things that feel safe to me, things I choose based on intuition more than anything else. We also have several cats and a dog, and I live in a trailer on land that's been in my family for decades. I don't know what this is, or why it seems attached to me, or why it finally crossed into my sleep last night. I just know it feels patient, observant, like it's been waiting for something from me this whole time. And honestly, I'd really appreciate any guidance at all. So, when I was about 16, maybe 17, my younger sister Danny and I ended up sharing a room. She was about 5 or 6 years younger than me then, still very much a kid. We moved into our older brother's old room after he left home. It was the biggest room in the house, with the nicest light, and to us, it felt like an upgrade. We put 2 beds in there and thought it would be fun. But honestly, from the very beginning, something about that room felt wrong. It's strange, because my brother had stayed there for years and never mentioned anything unusual. But for us, the whole space felt heavy. That's the only word I can really use for it. Heavy. Like the air in there pressed down on you. We both felt it, even before anything started happening. Around that same time, people in my friend group had been hanging around these abandoned places on the edge of town. Then things got ugly. The police got involved after a few girls came home bruised, and there were all these stories going around about rituals, animal remains, and initiations that had turned violent. I never knew how much of it was rumor and how much was true, but the atmosphere around all of that was dark, and it stuck with me. Then, things started happening in our room. At first, it was scratching in the walls. That awful kind of sound that makes your skin crawl because it always seems close, but never close enough to explain. We tried to be rational. We thought maybe it was a mouse, or pipes, or the house settling. But the sound was too deliberate, too near us. I remember one night hearing it right beside my head, so close it felt like something was scraping the wall inches from my pillow. I panicked, jumped up, and bolted for the door so hard I nearly ripped it open. My sister heard it too. She heard all of it. The room was always creaking. The floor, the furniture, everything. Even when nothing was moving, it felt like something in there was restless. We started sleeping with a lamp on because neither of us could stand the dark anymore. Not long after that, I began having sleep paralysis, and it wasn't occasional. It got bad. Some nights it happened more than once. I became scared to go to sleep because I knew what might be waiting for me the second I drifted off. Then, one night, I woke up feeling something gripping my ankle. I couldn't move, and I heard this low, guttural voice saying my name. Not shouting it, not whispering it, just saying it in this awful, deep tone that didn't sound human at all. I still get chills thinking about it. My parents believed us, mostly because they could see how terrified we were. We weren't making it up. We were exhausted, anxious, and constantly on edge. But they didn't really know what to do. So after a while, we fell into this horrible routine of just enduring it, pretending it was normal, even though something unsettling happened in that room almost every night. And the weirdest part was that it was only that room. Nothing like it happened anywhere else in the house. One night, my sister was lying in bed when she suddenly ran out crying. She said something had pinched her hard on the back. When we looked, there were red marks there, clear ones. She was shaking. Another time, I was in the kitchen with my grandmother when we heard a huge crash from upstairs, followed by this dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. I already knew, somehow, that it had come from our room. We ran upstairs and found that a small bust of Jesus we kept on a shelf had fallen. But it hadn't just fallen straight down. It had ended up under a table, dragged across the floor in a path that made no sense at all. There was no natural way it could have landed there. Things kept happening after that. Different noises, different moments, the same awful feeling. It continued until I moved out at 19. And then, just like that, it stopped. The room went quiet. My sister stayed there by herself after I left and never said anything else happened. And for me, the sleep paralysis disappeared too. Completely. After all that time, after how constant it had been, it was just gone. I could finally sleep without dread. I felt lighter, calmer, like I'd stepped out from under something I hadn't fully realized had been crushing me. A few years later, the house burned down. My parents moved somewhere else, and eventually my husband and I rebuilt on the property and moved in. I was nervous at first, more than I wanted to admit. But nothing like that ever happened again. We've had a few odd things over the years, sure, but we always knew the reason for them. Nothing touched that feeling from back then. Whatever was in that room when I was a teenager, it never came back. And to this day, I still don't know what to make of it. I just know what it felt like to live through it. I was about 10 when my mom and my former stepdad rented this house in a quiet little neighborhood on the nicer side of town. It was one of those places where every house looked almost exactly the same. Same shape, same layout, same materials, just painted different colors. But the one my mom chose had this huge extra room added onto the back. It was enormous, bigger than the garage, and somehow that made the whole place feel even stranger. From the moment we moved in, the house felt off. It was darker than anywhere we'd lived before, darker than the apartments we came from. And as a kid, I think I picked up on that kind of thing more strongly. You know how children sometimes sense when something doesn't feel right, even when they can't explain it? That was me in that house from the very beginning. During our first week there, we were still in the chaos of moving, trying to settle in while school was already going on. It was a stressful time for all of us. One of those first nights, a package showed up at the house. It only had our address on it. No name, no return address, nothing. When we opened it, there was a book inside about witchcraft and summoning spells. That scared my sister and me immediately. We had just moved in, and that was the first strange thing to arrive at our door. My mom was horrified. She and my stepdad tore it up and got rid of it in a dumpster a few streets away. At the time, we thought it was just some creepy mistake. Looking back, it felt more like a warning. A few months after we moved in, my mom started saying she saw shadows in the hallway. My older sister said the same thing. I didn't actually see them then, but I was still scared a lot because the house was always so dim and heavy. Around that same time, there was a lot of tension in the family. People were angry, arguments were constant, and everything felt fractured. We stopped seeing relatives as much. We stayed home more. Everybody kind of pulled inward. Honestly, I still believe that all that tension made the atmosphere in the house even worse. There was supposed to be this tall, shadow-like figure that would appear in the hallway or move through it. And there were always these little noises. Scratching at the bathroom door, scratching near the closet in my room, sounds in the hall when no one was there. I remember one night really clearly. I was in the bathroom, sitting there with my old iPod, just minding my business, when I heard this faint scratching at the door. At first, I thought it was my sister messing with me, because that was exactly the kind of thing she'd do. So I called out, "What?" For a second, nothing happened. Then the scratching came back, slower this time, like someone with a long fingernail was dragging it across the outside of the door. I told it to stop, and it actually stopped. When I came out, I went straight to the back family room where my sister was sitting. I told her not to do that while I was in the bathroom because it freaked me out. She just looked at me, completely confused, and said she'd been in the back room the whole time. I accused her of lying, but she kept insisting she hadn't gone near the hallway. Even now, when I think about that moment, it gets under my skin. Because whatever made that sound was right outside the door with me. A while later, my uncle, my tío, came to stay with us from out of state for a couple of weeks. He slept on the floor in the big back room, and my sister and I stayed out there too, because we didn't get to see him very often and wanted to be close to him. That room connected into what used to be the original living room, then into the kitchen. From where we slept, you could see into the kitchen if the light was on, and standing near the island was something small. At first I thought maybe someone had gotten up for water, but as my eyes adjusted, I could see it more clearly. It looked like a little girl. She had long hair and was wearing a white dress, but I couldn't make out a face. I froze. I remember wanting to scream, but I couldn't. My uncle and my sister were both asleep, and I didn't know what to do. I just pulled the blanket over my head and stayed there, trying to convince myself I wasn't seeing what I thought I was seeing. After a while, I looked again. She was gone. That was the only time I ever saw that figure, but it stayed with me. For years in that house, I had horrible dreams. Dreams about dark figures, demons, things trying to reach me while I slept. There were a few that repeated. One looked almost blue, with glowing yellow eyes and sharp teeth. Another was this long, shadowy shape with stretched out hands, and every dream with that one felt soaked in red. I was just a kid, and those dreams felt so real that even now I can still picture them. There were plenty of other things that happened over the years, too many to list one by one. My mom had her own stories. My sister did too. It wasn't just me. Then, after we'd lived there for a few years and were finally moving out, another strange package showed up. Same as before, just our address, no name, no return address. And inside was another book about spells. That was when some of the neighbors finally told us what they knew. Apparently, a couple had lived there years earlier. At first, they seemed friendly, normal even, but eventually things got bad. The boyfriend became abusive, the police were called often, and after a while there were parties, drugs, strangers coming and going at all hours. One neighbor said the girlfriend had gotten involved with occult stuff and had started practicing things inside the house. I don't know how much of that was true, and I can't prove any of it. But whatever happened there, it felt like something ugly had been left behind. The strangest part was that the house never seemed to keep renters for long. Families moved in and out constantly. People would stay less than a year and leave. After hearing that, I couldn't help wondering whether they had felt things too. Even now, after all these years, I still dream about that house. Not always the terrifying parts anymore. Most of the time it just appears out of nowhere, like a place my mind still hasn't let go of. No matter what kind of dream I'm having, somehow that house always finds its way back in. So I've been living with my partner since early fall, and for the longest time, everything felt totally normal. Calm, cozy, nothing strange at all. But a couple of weeks ago, that changed, and I still can't really explain why. We have a newborn, just about 3 months old now, so I'm home with the baby most of the day by myself. At night, I sleep in a separate room with him so my partner can get decent sleep for work, which means I spend a lot of time alone. And before I say anything else, no, I really don't think this is just exhaustion. The baby actually sleeps pretty well most nights, and this didn't start when I was at my most sleep-deprived. At first, it was little things. I'd think I heard footsteps moving through the house, sometimes at night, sometimes during the day. Our place is tiny, so every sound carries. I can hear someone step onto the porch from the back room, and I can even hear the cats crunching their food in the kitchen. So when I started noticing what sounded like someone walking around, it got my attention. Then there were moments where I thought I saw someone standing near the doorway, or just moving past the room where the baby and I were. Not clearly, not enough to say for sure, but enough to make me look twice. Part of me tried to explain it away. I'd had this awful dream one night about someone standing outside the window by our bed, and in the dream, they came inside. Ever since then, that window has made me uneasy. So I thought maybe my brain was just stuck on that, making me paranoid. But the weird part is, I never felt outright terrified, more unsettled than scared. And the cats never reacted to any of it, which made it easier to brush off. Then one night, I was lying in bed and heard a noise. I couldn't even tell you exactly what it was, just something that made me pause. Right after that, I was sure I saw my partner step into the room. I looked up, and no one was there. I tried to let it go. A minute later, he actually did come in. I remember looking at him in the dark and saying, "What?" And he just stood there for a second and said, "Never mind." I asked, "No, what? Did you hear that too?" And he said, "Yeah, what was that?" I told him I didn't know, and then he said he thought he heard someone say, "Hey." I immediately told him to stop because he was freaking me out. He kind of brushed it off and said maybe one of the cats made some odd sound, but I remember thinking, no way, that did not sound like a cat. The next day, though, he admitted that he'd heard it clearly. A man's voice, plain as day. He thought someone might actually be in the house, and that's why he got up to check on me and the baby. And that's what really got me, because he is not the type to get out of bed in the middle of the night unless something feels seriously wrong. That was the first time I told him I'd been hearing things too. The footsteps, the almost seeing someone moments, all of it. He tried to keep it light and joked that maybe we had a ghost, but a friendly one. He even said the energy felt calm, like maybe it was someone watching over us. One of our grandfathers maybe, keeping an eye on the baby. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But then a few days ago, it happened again, and this time, it was broad daylight. I was in the kitchen making a bottle, just me and the baby at home, and I heard a man's voice say, "Hello," right near me. Not far away, not muffled, close. I turned around immediately, and of course, no one was there. The room was empty. I told myself maybe I imagined it. Maybe I misheard something outside. Maybe my brain filled in a sound that wasn't really a voice. But deep down, I know what I heard. My partner still isn't worried. He keeps saying that if it is something, it doesn't feel bad to him. But I don't know. That's the part that bothers me. What if something doesn't feel threatening at first? What if it's pretending to be harmless? I hate even saying that out loud, because I don't want to feed into it or make it worse. I barely even like thinking about it. The only thing that calms me down is the cats. They wander through the whole house like everything is perfectly fine. No staring into corners, no puffed up tails, no weird behavior. If they seemed upset, I think I'd be losing it by now. What makes this all feel even stranger is how sudden it was. I'd already been living here for months. I'd already been alone in the house during the day. I'd already been sleeping separately with the baby for a long time. And then, out of nowhere, this started. So yeah, I don't know what to make of it. Maybe there's a logical explanation. Maybe stress is doing something weird. Maybe it's nothing. But whatever it is, it feels real when it happens. And honestly, I just needed to say it out loud, because keeping it all in my head has started to make me spiral a little. So, this happened when I was waiting at my university library for my mom to come get me. It was around 7:45 at night, and I was just sitting there quietly, cutting out some charts I'd printed for class, totally in my own little world. Then this young woman walked up to me and started talking about God. She said she was sharing her faith and telling people about her church. Now, I'm really not a religious person at all. Honestly, religion usually makes me uncomfortable. But she seemed calm and sincere, and I didn't want to be rude, so I just listened. She started telling me her story, and at the end of it she said, "That was the first time I felt the Holy Spirit." I was just trying to be polite and keep the conversation going, so I asked her, "What does that feel like?" And she looked at me and said she could show me right there. I said yes, mostly because I'm curious by nature. I'm not religious, but I do believe there's more to life than what we can always explain. So I figured, why not? She placed her hand on my shoulder and started praying. Then she asked me to repeat a few words after her. I felt a little awkward because we were literally in the middle of the library, but at that point, I was already committed, so I just went along with it. While I was repeating what she said, I noticed her hand felt freezing cold. Not just cool, like shockingly cold. But at the same time, it didn't feel heavy or solid the way a hand normally does. It almost felt weightless, like it was barely touching me and hovering at the same time. I know that sounds strange, but that's the closest I can get to describing it. When she finished praying, I opened my eyes and asked her, "Are you cold?" She immediately said no. So I touched her hand, just for a second, and it was actually warm. Warmer than mine, even. And that really threw me off. I told her what I'd felt, and she just kind of smiled and said it was a sign. But what stood out to me was that she didn't seem excited about it. I don't know, I expected more of a reaction. She was just calm. Almost too calm. Right then, my mom called to say she was outside, so I told the woman I had to go. Before I left, she said, "If you ever see me here again, come talk to me." I started packing up my things as fast as I could because I didn't want to keep my mom waiting. And I mean, it couldn't have been more than a few seconds. Maybe 5 tops. But when I looked up, she was gone. I was sitting near the entrance, and the library was pretty empty by then, so I thought maybe she'd stepped outside. I looked around inside first. Nothing. Then I went out front and scanned the whole area, but she wasn't there either. I could see a few people farther off, people I'd already noticed leaving earlier, but not her. Nowhere. And that's when I started feeling off. My body suddenly felt heavy, like all my energy had dropped at once, and my head started to ache. Later, when I thought back on everything, a few details started bothering me. She didn't have a purse, no backpack, no phone that I could see. She was holding a few church pamphlets, but she never offered me one, which seems odd considering the whole conversation was about faith. And even after I told her I felt something during the prayer, she still didn't hand me anything or invite me anywhere. Another thing, she asked for my name early on and kept repeating it like, Maya, right? Every so often. But she never actually used it naturally in conversation after that. It felt almost like she was trying to make sure she remembered it for some reason, but I've never had an experience like that before. And my dad, of course, thinks I met a ghost. What makes it even creepier is that my university was built on land that used to be a military post, and people have shared all kinds of paranormal stories about the campus over the years. So, honestly, I still don't know what to make of it. I'm not saying she was a ghost, but I am saying I've never forgotten her. I've been trying to make sense of something that happened in my family, and honestly, I still don't fully know what to believe. My grandmother, Lila, lived alone in a big old house right in the middle of the city for nearly 3 decades. She was always very independent and never wanted to stay with anyone. She also had a difficult relationship with her children, including my mom. But one thing about her was certain: she prayed constantly. Every single day, she would spend hours praying in that house. When my mom was about 16, a priest came to bless the home. During the blessing, he became uneasy and said something in the house felt deeply unsettled. He told the family that whenever he tried to pray, it felt like something was interrupting him, almost as if there was a presence pushing against the prayer itself. Years later, my grandmother was still living there alone. At one point, she hired a few men to do some construction in the back part of the property. Since the weather was warm and the backyard had tall trees and cool air at night, they decided to sleep outside under a covered area. After a few nights, they told my grandmother they had been hearing a woman crying in the dark. Not just softly, but in a way that sounded full of pain. Then one night, they said they saw a woman with long black hair standing near the trees. They were so frightened they left the job unfinished and never came back. Even though my grandmother could be very harsh with my mom still cared for her when she became seriously ill over the last couple of years. She helped her recover, looked after her, and stayed by her side. But even then, my grandmother would still speak badly about her to other people. It hurt my mom deeply, but she kept caring for her anyway. Not long ago, my grandmother passed away in our home. My mom was devastated. Even after everything, she loved her and wanted to honor her properly, so she brought her back to her house for the final rites. Then something strange happened. Either the night of the funeral or the night after, my mom was lying in bed when she felt something tapping her lightly, almost like a fingernail touching her skin several times. Right after that, she felt a crushing weight on her chest and shoulder, like someone had sat down on her. She said in that moment she felt an overwhelming dread, like something had gone very wrong. By the next day, her body felt so weak and heavy that even climbing the stairs became difficult. She had to pull herself up using her hands. She told my dad she needed to see a doctor because she felt like whatever was happening was getting worse fast. On the way to the clinic, they passed a church where a feast day celebration for a saint was taking place. They decided to stop and go inside. That saint is known in our area for a special blessing where 2 candles are placed in an X shape near the neck. The moment my mom received that blessing, every bit of pain left her body. Instantly, completely. She was shocked. One second she felt crushed, and the next she was fine. Before that happened, when she first started feeling sick, she had told someone she trusted. That person told her they had seen something similar in their own family and believed it was caused by a spirit attaching itself to someone. They even said that in cases like that, the affected person could die within 30 days. Hearing that terrified my mom. That was last week. Then yesterday, the same staff member told my mom that ever since she went to that house, she hasn't felt right. She's been feeling weak, unwell, and she says the symptoms are almost exactly the same ones my mom had. Now my mom believes that something has always been wrong with that house, and that my grandmother's constant prayers may have been the only thing keeping it contained. And now that she's gone, whatever was being held back is starting to show itself. I really don't know what to think, but that's what happened. And the whole thing has left our family shaken. Last night I was doing a short NSDR session, maybe around 25 minutes, and somewhere in the middle, something happened that didn't feel like a normal thought or daydream. It felt more like I had stepped into something real. All of a sudden, I was back in one of the apartments I lived in as a kid. Not the very first one, but the place we stayed in for a few years. The one that still carries the strongest memories for me. What made it so strange was that I wasn't there as my younger self. I was there as who I am now, standing in that place at night. The building was always so empty back then. Hardly anyone lived there, maybe a few families at most. And the entrance to our floor always had this dim, shadowy feeling, especially after dark. It was never fully welcoming. It felt unfinished, silent, and a little unsettling in a way I could never really explain. I used to pretend it didn't bother me, but honestly, there were nights when I would rush through that hallway because it felt like something was there. And during this NSDR session, I didn't feel like I was remembering that space. I felt like I was actually there, standing in that exact dark entrance as the person I am today. Then came the part that really stayed with me. I had this strong sense that my younger self was there too. Not seeing me clearly maybe, but sensing me. Feeling some presence in the dark and reacting to it, running because of it. And the wildest part was this feeling that maybe I was that presence. Like somehow, in that moment, I was the thing that used to scare me when I was younger. Like I had slipped into an old moment and, for a second, became part of it. It wasn't crystal clear visually or anything like that. It was more about the feeling of it, and that feeling was incredibly real. Deep, strange, and honestly a little emotional. It felt like two versions of me crossed paths for a moment. Like time folded in on itself just enough for me to step into something that had already happened. I still don't really know how to explain it. It didn't feel like a dream. It felt more like I tuned into something that was already there, like I touched an old memory in a way that was somehow alive. And I've been thinking about it ever since. I want to start with a little context, because I feel like what happened last night makes more sense with the backstory. I grew up in a very religious Muslim household. My mother has always been deeply devoted, and faith has been the center of her life for as long as I can remember. But for me, religion never settled into my heart the same way. Even as a kid, a lot of the stories and imagery frightened me more than they comforted me. As I got older, especially in my teens, I started questioning everything. I read more, thought more, and eventually came to the conclusion that I just didn't believe in it the way my family did. At first, that was a hard thing to admit to myself. It felt heavy, almost like grief, but over time, I accepted it. Even so, I've always had this strange respect for people who are sincerely spiritual in a gentle, compassionate way. I think I envy them a little. They seem to have this sense of purpose, this deeper meaning that guides them. And when belief makes someone kinder, more patient, more human, I can understand why people cling to it. For me, living without that has left this emptiness I can't really describe, and years of depression haven't exactly helped. On top of that, I've dealt with sleep paralysis for a long time. A lot of times I've tried to explain it away, but some experiences have felt so vivid, so invasive, that I honestly don't know what to make of them. I felt something grab my arm before. I've heard whispering right by my ear. I've had dreams where I'm dragged through dark places for what feels like hours. And over the past year or so, there's been this figure that keeps appearing. This tall, smoky, human-shaped shadow. The first few times I saw it, I was terrified. But eventually, because it usually just stood there watching me, and I'd wake up before it got too close, I almost got used to it. Not comfortable, exactly, but familiar. The last time I dreamed about it, I remember not panicking. It just sat across from me, completely still, like it was studying me. It never spoke before. It just lingered. And then there's something else. Sometimes when I'm home alone, I hear my name being called. A few weeks ago, I heard it in my younger cousin's voice more than once, which really shook me. That was one of the moments that made me think, okay, either I'm losing my grip on reality, or something is seriously wrong. I'm not making any of this up. I know how it sounds. I really do. But whether or not I follow a religion, I've come to believe there are things out there that are dark and malicious. So, last night, my older sister and I ended up watching a video that had been recommended to me. One of those videos about sinister spirit encounters and how Christianity interprets them. It wasn't cheesy horror movie stuff. It was more historical, more serious, and somehow that made it worse. The narrator started mentioning names, reading old phrases aloud, and both of us got this immediate, unmistakable feeling that the atmosphere had shifted. It felt wrong. We turned it off before it finished and put on some calming background sounds instead, just to shake the mood. I actually fell asleep on the couch for a little while after that, and I was completely fine. Nothing weird. But when I went to my room, that uneasy feeling came back. I asked my sister to sit with me for a bit, hold my hand, and say a prayer over me. Maybe it was psychological, maybe not, but hearing sacred words, especially ancient ones, has always felt like it carries some kind of weight. I left my bedside lamp on. I remember that clearly. I also put on soft ambient music, and it was sometime around 3:20 in the morning when I finally drifted off. And almost immediately, I woke up inside a dream, so I let her guide me. We were walking through this enormous hallway, way too wide to feel normal, with low lighting and that awful hollow silence that large empty buildings have. Someone passed us, and I instinctively grabbed onto her arm tighter. Then my legs gave out beneath me, and I dropped to the floor. But the second I hit the ground, I was dragged backward. Not like I slipped, not like I fell. I mean dragged, suddenly and forcefully, across a long stretch of floor, like something had yanked me. I somehow managed to pull myself up, and my sister looked at me and asked, "Are you okay?" The way she said it chilled me instantly. She sounded too calm, too flat, too cold. My real sister would have been panicking, helping me up, asking 100 questions. And in that moment, I knew. I looked at her and said, "You're not my sister." And she said, "No, I'm not." Her face started to distort, like it was going out of focus, and I squeezed my eyes shut because I couldn't bear to look at her. I kept repeating to myself, "This is just a dream. This is just a dream. This is just a dream." I tried to force myself into a lucid dream so I could escape. I imagined a scene from a movie I love, something familiar, something safe. Suddenly I was there, inside that setting, and for a second I thought I'd done it. I saw the car, the street, everything exactly how I'd pictured it. But the person I'd wanted to see wasn't right. When he finally appeared, he didn't speak. He just stared at me with this intense hatred and raised a gun. I panicked and tried to make the gun fail, like changing the rules of the dream. But I knew I wasn't in control. So I forced the scene to change again, and suddenly I was floating through space. Stars, clouds of color, silence. It was beautiful for maybe 2 seconds. Then, I was slammed back into a warped version of my bedroom and thrown to the floor. That was when I saw it. The shadow figure. It was standing in the middle of the room, darker than the room itself somehow, with edges that looked like smoke or ash moving in water. It said something to me, but I still can't remember the exact words. It didn't rush me at first. It just seemed entertained, like it was enjoying how helpless I was. I pushed myself up, and it knocked me down again. I shut my eyes and tried to escape, tried to imagine somewhere else, and I ended up on a quiet street. There were 2 cats sitting on a set of steps, and I remember feeling this desperate hope, like maybe something gentle still existed in that dream. I crouched down and started petting one of them. Then I heard this low growl, and the cat under my hand changed. It became this horrible, raw mass of flesh. I can still remember the texture of it under my fingers. That moment genuinely made me feel like all comfort had been stripped away from the dream. Then I was back in my room again, on the floor, with that thing closer now. This part is what's really stayed with me. I said to it, "I'm not afraid of you." And it answered, in this warped, muffled voice, "Oh, really?" The conversation was in English, which is not even my first language, and for some reason that made it even more unsettling. I asked why it was doing this to me, but it ignored the question. Instead, it started flickering around the room. 1 second in the corner, then suddenly right beside me. I could barely stand. My whole body felt heavy and wrong. So I asked it, "What's your name?" It laughed. "I'm not going to write the name out. I can't. Even now, it makes my skin crawl." I was crying in the dream by that point, and I said the only thing I could think of. I told it, "I believe in God. God will protect me." And it came closer and said, "You know that isn't true. I know you don't believe." That sentence hit me harder than anything else, because it felt like it knew exactly where to wound me. I kept repeating it anyway. I said every sacred phrase I could grab from memory, from different faiths, almost frantically. Anything that sounded holy, anything that might push it back. But it didn't react with fear. If anything, it seemed almost amused. It came so close it was touching me, as if it wanted to prove that none of my words meant anything. Then it pushed me backward. I fell in this horrible, slow-motion way, and when I landed, it covered me completely. Not like a person pinning someone down, more like smoke being poured over me, sinking into every part of my body. At first, it was suffocating. I was horrified. But then the sensation changed, and that might be the most disturbing part of all. It became strangely euphoric. My own body reacted in a way that made me feel disgusted with myself. And it whispered, very softly, "I know you like this." It kept saying my name. I felt violated, repulsed, trapped. At one point, I could see my real body lying in bed from above, like I was hovering near the ceiling looking down at myself. I tried over and over to get back into my body, like diving toward it. But every time I failed, I was pulled back into that room with the thing still over me. Eventually, somehow, I made it back. I woke up all at once. My room was completely dark, and that's what sent me into full panic, because I had left the lamp on. I know I did. I jumped up and turned it back on immediately. Nothing was there, of course, just my room. But my heart was pounding so hard, I thought I might be sick. When I checked the time, it was 3:48 a.m. I had only been asleep for maybe half an hour, but it felt like I'd been trapped in that nightmare for an entire night. I use a smart bulb, so once I calmed down enough to think clearly, I opened the app on my phone to check the schedule. The shut-off time had changed. It had been set to turn off at 3:35 a.m. I never set it that way. I always leave it scheduled for much later in the morning. Seeing that made my blood run cold, because it meant the light had gone out right after I fell asleep. And it lined up almost perfectly with the moment everything in the dream became darker and more violent. Maybe there's a rational explanation. Maybe there is. But in that moment, it did not feel rational. By the time the sun came up, I still hadn't gone back to sleep. I felt dirty, honestly. Not physically dirty exactly, more like something had gotten under my skin, into me somehow. The first thing I did in the morning was take a shower because I couldn't stand the feeling. And ever since, I've just been sitting with these questions. What was that thing? Why does it keep coming back? Did I invite something in by watching that video and listening to those names? And the part that scares me most, did it leave something behind? Some kind of mark, spiritually or emotionally, that's not just going to disappear because daylight came. I know some people will hear this and say it was just a nightmare, just sleep paralysis, just stress layered on top of old fears. And maybe that's true. I'm not closed off to that possibility. But what I felt was so vivid, so personal, so deliberate, that I can't just brush it off. So that's what happened. And honestly, I'm still scared. You know, when people talk about skinwalkers, a lot of the time the story gets twisted into something flashy or exaggerated. But from the way I first heard it told, it was always something darker, sadder, and far more serious than a campfire legend. Skinwalkers, as they were described to me, were said to be people from within the Navajo community who learned what's often called bad medicine. And the truly frightening part wasn't just the power people believed they had. It was the choice behind it. These were said to be individuals selfish enough, bitter enough, to turn against their own people and break sacred taboos in exchange for power. A lot of the details surrounding how they begin are kept secret, and honestly, that silence feels intentional. But in the stories I heard, their path involved acts so disturbing and unnatural that most people wouldn't even want to repeat them out loud. From what I was told, their behavior could vary depending on who they were before they crossed that line. But the one thing that stayed the same in every version was this: they were deeply self-serving. They didn't act for the good of anyone else. They separated themselves from the community, and whatever they became after that, it wasn't something people wanted near their homes or families. Most stories place them out on the edges of Navajo land, moving in the late hours, keeping to the dark, where the road ends and the open land begins. And the fear around them wasn't random either. People said their cruelty was most often directed toward the Dene themselves. What made the stories especially unsettling were the abilities people connected to them. The best known, of course, was shapeshifting. The teller I remember most clearly, an older man named Tomas, said that in many accounts, a skinwalker had to kill an animal, skin it, and wear that hide in order to take its form. But even then, the transformation was never supposed to be perfect. He described them as wrong somehow, the skin hanging oddly from the body, the limbs bending in ways they shouldn't, the eyes sometimes looking too human. That image stayed with me, because it wasn't just about becoming an animal. It was about becoming something close enough to fool you for a second, but wrong enough to haunt you after. And then there was the mimicry. That was the part that made people lower their voices. The idea that something out there could call to you in a familiar voice, could sound like someone you know, someone you trust, just enough to make you step closer. Some stories also said they could carry powders or curses meant to harm or poison, not always through direct attack, but through something quieter, more deliberate. And one thing I heard again and again was this: speaking too freely about them was dangerous, especially using certain names. The belief was that talking about them too openly might draw their attention, and that alone was enough to make people stop mid-sentence. As for where these stories belong, they were always tied to the Four Corners region, to places in Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. That's where the stories live, and where they make cultural sense. So when people claim they saw a skinwalker way off in some faraway place with no real connection to that history, it usually tells you one of two things. Either they're borrowing a name they don't fully understand, or they ran into something else entirely. And honestly, I'm not sure which possibility is worse. Hearing one of those story channels the other night brought back something I hadn't thought about in years. I was sitting there with my wife, listening, and all of a sudden, this memory came rushing back from when I was around 12, maybe 13. Back then, my mom and I had just moved into this small house tucked behind another one. At first glance, it felt like any ordinary place. You'd walk in and see the living room right away, the bedrooms off to the side, the bathroom near the front, and then a narrow hallway leading straight toward the kitchen in the back. Nothing about it looked strange, but almost from the beginning, something about that house felt wrong. Heavy. Like the air inside it was pressing down on me. I remember one day my mom realized she had forgotten something inside and asked me to run back in and grab it. The second she said it, this awful wave of fear hit me. I didn't even know why. I just suddenly felt like I absolutely did not want to go back in there alone. But I did. When I opened the door and looked down the hallway toward the kitchen, I saw him. There was this figure standing near the railing at the far end, almost like he had been waiting there. He looked like a man, but not really a person, more like a shape made out of pure darkness. No face, no features, nothing I could make out. Just this black silhouette, darker than the room around him. He was leaning slightly, almost casually, like he was looking down at the counter. And then he turned his head toward me. I can still remember the fear that hit me in that moment. I grabbed what my mom had asked for and ran out as fast as I could. I told her what I saw, but she brushed it off and told me I had a wild imagination. After that, it didn't stop. That same feeling kept coming back, stronger and stronger. Sometimes I'd catch that dark figure near the kitchen. Other times I'd feel like he was standing in the hallway, just outside my line of sight. A lot of the time, I'd only notice him in the corner of my eye as I passed by, and every single time it left me frozen with fear. Then there was this one afternoon that really stayed with me. I had gone to a birthday party at a neighbor's house nearby. We were outside playing, running around, getting dirty, and my mom told me to go home and change my clothes. I didn't want to go by myself, so I asked my neighbor and her cousin to come with me. I figured that if I wasn't alone, maybe nothing would happen. We went inside, laughing and talking, probably louder than we should have been. I remember telling them to keep it down because the woman who owned the house was older and hated noise. I thought maybe she'd come out and complain. But then, just like before, that fear came over me again out of nowhere. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move. It was fast, like something had dropped or leaped down from the railing at the end of the hall. I stopped cold. The girls saw my face change and asked me what was wrong. I told them nothing, but inside I was panicking. I just wanted to get out of there. We were about to leave when the front door suddenly opened by itself. What made it worse was that door was old and heavy, and it always scraped against the floor when you pushed it open. It stuck every time. You had to force it. There were even marks on the tile where it dragged. So when it opened on its own, we all just stared at each other. And then we heard it. A voice, right there near the doorway, going, "Shh." Not loud, not angry, just close. But there was nobody there. We ran back and told my mom and the other adults everything, but no one believed us. To them, it was just kids getting worked up over nothing. We stayed in that house for a while after that, and honestly, whenever I had to be there alone, I avoided being inside as much as I could. I'd stay out in the yard for hours, just so I wouldn't have to walk through that hallway or look toward that kitchen. I never found out what it was. I still don't know if it was some kind of spirit, something attached to the house, or something my mind could never make sense of. All I know is that what I felt in that place was real, and even now, after all these years, I can still picture that dark figure standing at the end of the hall, turning to look at me. Hey, I'm not going to share my exact age or anyone's real name, but this happened a few years ago, and I still think about it more often than I'd like. It was at a wedding in an old estate in rural Spain, a little outside Madrid. I was around 11 at the time, and back then, I kept to myself a lot. I was one of those kids who could be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. I didn't really know how to fit in, so I usually just drifted off on my own. And honestly, strange things had already happened to me before that night. Things I could never really explain. People always said it was my imagination, or that I was mistaken, or that I'd seen something in the wrong light. But deep down, I've always known when something felt wrong, and I've learned not to ignore that feeling. The wedding itself was huge, probably well over 100 people, and aside from a few relatives and cousins, I barely knew anyone there. During the day, it was actually nice. There was a long table full of amazing food. Everyone was laughing, and I spent a while running around with my cousins. By the time evening rolled in, though, the whole place had changed. The adults were drinking, dancing, shouting over the music, just having the time of their lives. I didn't want to be in the middle of all that noise, so I wandered off to a quieter part of the building. Not too far, but far enough that the music sounded distant and muffled. I remember there was an old couch there, and I sat down with my phone, half distracted, messing around with some colorful bracelet bands I'd brought with me. The room felt dim and still. What stood out most was this small rectangular window set high up on the wall, maybe 8 feet off the ground. It was the kind of thing you wouldn't pay much attention to, until you suddenly did. Out of nowhere, I got this wave of goosebumps. You know that feeling when the air changes for no reason, and your body notices before your mind does? That's what it felt like. I tried to shake it off, told myself I was just tired. Then I looked up toward that window, and something passed by it. Not walking, not running. It moved too smoothly for that. It was like it glided across the opening. I froze. I didn't get a full look at the face, but I could tell it looked like a girl, or at least something shaped like one. I saw long, dark, perfectly straight hair, and something pale trailing behind her head like a veil. Her skin, or whatever I saw of it, looked almost unnaturally white. Not just pale, more like paper in moonlight. I told myself I had imagined it. I really did. I thought maybe I was overtired. Maybe my eyes had played a trick on me. Then it passed the window again. A second time. And that's when my whole body just dropped into panic. I started crying immediately. Not the dramatic kind, just pure fear. The kind that hits you before you can even think. I dropped everything. My phone, the bands, all of it. And I ran straight back toward the music and the crowd I'd been trying to get away from. I found my mom and a couple of my cousins and tried to explain what I'd seen. I was shaking, crying, barely getting the words out. But nobody believed me. They just smiled awkwardly, patted me on the shoulder, and treated it like I was telling some spooky little kid story. I've replayed that night so many times in my head. I'm older now, and I've tried to leave it in the past, to file it away as one of those things I'll never have answers for. Most days I can. Most days I can convince myself it belongs to another part of my life. Still, every now and then, it comes back to me. That window, that veil, the way it moved. And I can't help wondering when something unexplainable will happen again. Because if it does, I already know how it'll go. I'll be the only one who believes me. Hey, I just need to say this out loud because I feel like I'm carrying it around by myself, and it's getting heavier. For context, I'm 19. I'm from Nigeria, and that matters because where I come from, people don't always separate dreams from spiritual things. A lot of us grow up hearing that some dreams mean more than they seem, so when this started happening to me, it didn't feel easy to brush off. A few years ago, I had this dream that really shook me. In it, I was outside my own body, almost like I was watching myself from somewhere above, and there was this dark presence trying to force its way in, like it wanted control. I had to fight it off. When I woke up, I told myself it was probably just some weird, intense dream. I've always liked scary movies and creepy stories, so I convinced myself my imagination had just gone too far that night. But it didn't stop there. Since then, I've been having dreams that feel way too real. It's like I'm stepping into another version of my life, or another version of me, and I'm living through whatever she's going through. Sometimes I'm eating in the dream. Sometimes I'm running. Sometimes I'm barely surviving. There are also these recurring themes that keep coming back. Family members trying to harm us spiritually, people around me acting strange, me being warned not to accept food, not to trust what I see, not to let my guard down. And because of the culture I grew up in, all of it feels loaded. None of it feels random. I tried doing what I thought would help. I started praying more. I tried being more spiritually alert, more intentional, more connected to God, because my mother is very prayerful, and that's what I've always seen people do when something feels wrong. But somehow, instead of getting better, it got worse. What used to happen maybe once or twice a week started happening almost every night. Last night was especially bad. In the dream, something tiny entered my mouth. I think it was an insect, and I started choking. The scary part is that it felt like I was choking both in the dream and in real life. In that same dream, I remember hearing this warning very clearly. Don't let anything enter your mouth. And while I was struggling, I saw two figures near a staircase, just watching me. One of them looked almost human, and the other had this unsettling shape to it. They were just sitting there, laughing, like my fear was entertaining to them. Then some stranger appeared and tried to help me, tried to get me to spit everything out, and for a moment, I woke up. Only for a moment. I fell asleep again, and this time my mother was there, offering me food. And even in the dream, some part of me knew I shouldn't take it, but I still did. Then the night before that, I had another one. In that dream, there were these women who wanted me to help them rescue another girl. It all seemed urgent, and I agreed, but after I helped, they asked me something terrifying. They wanted us to switch souls. I said no. Thank God I said no. Even in the middle of all that confusion, I knew enough to refuse. But again, there was food involved. Again, there was this feeling that everything came with a trap hidden inside it. I'm exhausted. That's the honest truth. It's gotten so bad that I've started dealing with insomnia. I dread nighttime now. I don't even want to sleep because I already know something awful is waiting for me there. And the sleep deprivation is starting to affect everything. My mind feels worn down. Old feelings I thought I had buried are coming back too. Depression from when I was younger. Dark thoughts I don't want to entertain. Thoughts that scare me because I know where they can lead if I'm not careful. My dad thinks it's all just dreams. My mom, on the other hand, gets very anxious and sees danger in everything. So talking to either of them doesn't really leave me feeling safe or understood. I even looked into sleeping pills because I'm desperate. But one of the main side effects I keep seeing is vivid dreams and nightmares. And I honestly don't think I could survive anything more vivid than what I'm already experiencing. So right now, I feel trapped. Too scared to sleep. Too tired to function. and too overwhelmed to know what to do next. I'm saying all of this because I need help. I need relief. I need nighttime to stop feeling like a threat. Because every evening, when the sun starts going down, I can already feel the fear building in me. I start wondering what version of the nightmare is coming this time, what I'll see, what I'll feel, whether I'll wake up gasping again. I just want peace. I just want one night where I can close my eyes and rest without feeling like I'm entering a battle. So, this happened when I was still in school, and even now, I can't explain it in a way that feels completely right. I was in biology class one afternoon, and our teacher had just finished the lesson. She told us to copy the notes from the blackboard into our notebooks, so everyone had their heads down, writing. While we were doing that, she was walking around the classroom, just checking on us like teachers do. And then, all of a sudden, everything changed. She happened to glance out the window, and I remember her whole expression shifting. She looked genuinely panicked. Not confused, not surprised, panicked. She hurried out of our classroom and went straight to the class next door, brought that teacher back with her, and made her look outside too. And the second teacher reacted the same way. The two of them started shutting all the windows in our classroom and told us very firmly not to look outside. My biology teacher even pulled out her phone and quickly took a picture of whatever it was she had seen. Now, my biology teacher and I were pretty close. I loved science, and she had a soft spot for me. So a couple of days later, when things had calmed down a little, I asked her what had happened. She hesitated, but then she showed me the photo. And I still remember the feeling I got when I saw it. There was a human-like figure standing on top of a building. It had very long hair, and technically, yes, it looked like a person. But something about it felt wrong. The photo was zoomed in, so the quality was terrible, and that only made it worse somehow. You could make out the shape clearly enough, but not enough to feel certain. My teacher told me the figure had been moving in a strange way too. Very stiff, very slow, almost mechanical. She said it looked unnatural, like glitchy little movements instead of normal walking. What made it even more unsettling was this. That building was right next to the one where my family and I lived. Our home was so close to my school that I could literally see our building from the classroom windows. So the second I realized where that figure had been standing, I felt sick. I asked her why she hadn't taken a video instead of just a picture, and she told me she didn't have time. She said the figure had already started moving toward the stairs, like it was about to disappear downstairs. So she just snapped a photo as fast as she could. And to understand why this got under my skin so badly, you have to picture how close those buildings were. They were almost side by side, with this narrow open gap between them. From one building, you could easily see the hallways, doors, and landings of the other. We could all see each other's buildings very clearly. A few weeks went by. Then a new family moved into the apartment building next to ours. A few days after they arrived, I was outside near our front door, just walking around, when I noticed some of the new people across the gap. And then I saw him. A young man standing there, drying his hair. His hair was very long. Later, I found out the family was Sikh, and that explained the hair. They were new to the city, and some relatives who already lived nearby had helped them get that apartment. I even remembered seeing family members come by earlier to speak with the owners about the rent before they moved in. And then something in my mind just clicked. She opened it. And it was him. I'm telling you, it was him. Same height, same build, same long hair, same presence. I felt this horrible, cold drop in my chest. because here's the part that never left me. Before that family moved in, there was no one in that building who looked like that. Hardly any families lived there to begin with, and I knew all of them by sight. There was no tall young man in his 20s living there. No one with that kind of height, no one with that hair, no one with that face shape. And in the photo, you could even make out the outline of a beard and mustache. So how had my teacher photographed someone standing on that rooftop before he was even supposed to be there? That's the part I still can't explain. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to. Hello to everyone watching the Paranormal M channel. The moment is finally here. I get to sit down with the mic and share my paranormal experiences from around the world to help you relax and sleep better. And I'm still reading your comments, so don't forget to leave one and tell me where you're from. Thank you so much for sending in so many of your own paranormal stories. Now, let's listen to these experiences and wish each other a good night's sleep. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. So, this is one of those stories I still tell and then kind of laugh afterward. Like, what was my life for that stretch of time? For a few months, almost every single night, I'd have this presence show up right when I was turning off the last light in the living room, like clockwork. Here's the background. My dad's parents had this shared plan. Both of them wanted to be cremated, and then their ashes were supposed to be combined pretty quickly. But it was 2020, and not for any big, dramatic headline reason. Just one of those years where everything kept getting delayed and plans kept falling apart. My grandpa, let's call him Eddie because that name fits the vibe, ended up not getting handled the way he'd asked. His ashes were sitting in this large, matte black container, kind of like a tall canister, with his name printed on it. It wasn't even an urn. It was more like a temporary holding thing. And because no one quite knew what to do next, it got stuck in the back room with a bunch of random storage junk. Not dumped out, not moved along, just parked. And honestly, at first, it didn't feel like a big deal. Like if Eddie was around, he didn't seem to care. Until the day he did care. There was supposed to be a pickup or drop-off, something that would finally move things forward. And then it got canceled at the last minute. I wasn't even home when it happened, so I didn't find out until later. But apparently Eddie found out immediately, because that night, I turned off the final lamp, and someone was just there. For a split second, my brain did the normal thing and went, oh, that's Dad getting up for the bathroom. Except it wasn't Dad. It was taller than me, but not hugely. Definitely a masculine shape. And it wasn't see-through or wispy or like in movies. It was a solid black silhouette in the dark, so dense it blocked what little light was coming in from outside. Like a person standing right in front of you. And the feeling coming off him was unmistakable. Furious. Not at me, though. Just angry in general. Like someone who'd been disrespected and was done being patient. I didn't even fully understand what I was seeing at first. I just froze, staring like, why is there a man-shaped shadow in my living room? And then I did the most awkward thing possible. I kind of spoke out loud and went, I can't do messages. Because here's the thing. I hate the whole tell so-and-so this business. It's weird. It's uncomfortable. You're basically walking up to a living person and saying, hi, I know this sounds insane, but your dead relative wants me to tell you something. No, thank you. So I tried to just sidestep around him, like he was a grumpy stranger blocking the hallway. And then, without warning, he shifted, like instantly, right up against me, chest to chest, close enough that if he'd been physical, I would have bumped him. I didn't have time to stop, so I just walked through him, That part is hard to describe. It wasn't cold exactly. It was more like stepping through a dense patch of air that shouldn't be there. And it was awkward in this hilariously human way. Like both of us were thinking, well, that was weird. Nothing hurt. It didn't feel dangerous, just startling and oddly personal, like someone trying really hard to be noticed. And then he kept doing it. Night after night. Same timing. Last light goes off, and there he is. Sometimes right in front of me, sometimes a couple feet away. Always angry, always very present. After that, he stopped blocking me. He still showed up, but he'd be off to the side, like a man pacing in a room, simmering. Just looming there, while I went about turning off lights and trying to pretend this was normal. And then, this is the part that still makes my eyebrows go up. My dad's sister came to visit. Let's call her Brenda. I stayed out of her way because we do not get along, and I didn't want the drama. I barely spoke to her. I had no idea what she did while she was here. But that night, I turned off the last light like usual, and the living room was just a living room. No silhouette, no pressure in the air, no angry pacing man made of shadow, just darkness, normal darkness. And I remember standing there for a second thinking, oh, so that's what the room feels like when it's just a room. The next morning, I mentioned it casually, like it was the most normal sentence in the world. I said something like, hey, I've been seeing this angry ghost guy every night for months, but last night was the first time he didn't show up. And someone, very calmly, goes, yeah, Brenda took Eddie's ashes yesterday. That was it. Mystery solved, apparently. He never did the nightly angry visitor thing again. He has shown up a couple times since then, but it felt completely different. Lighter, calmer. Like whatever the problem was, it got fixed. Like he finally went, okay, thank you. That's all I wanted. So, yeah. Just a strange few months where the living room came with a built-in angry shadow man, until somebody finally moved the container like they were supposed to. Honestly, I get it. If I were stuck in a back room in a canister after making very clear plans, I'd probably haunt somebody too. So, this happened a little while back, and I still don't quite know what to do with it, but I want to tell you the way it felt. A few years ago, I lost a friend of mine really suddenly. His name was Evan. He was only 22, and it was the kind of loss that doesn't fit into your brain, no matter how many times you turn it over. After he passed, I had a couple dreams where he showed up, but they were always harmless. Silly even. Like we were all kids again, messing around, laughing at nothing, the way we used to. Nothing heavy, nothing that stuck. Then late December rolled around, and my body started doing this weird thing. It started as just feeling off, like the beginning of a cold that never fully became one. But within a few days, it got worse. I had this fever that would come and go, and my joints ached in this deep, all-over way that made me feel twice my age. I found swollen lymph nodes along my neck that kept getting more noticeable. I'm 27, and I remember thinking, this is not normal. This is not just tired. I did what you're supposed to do. I went in. I got blood work. I got tested for everything they could think of. COVID, mono, Lyme, autoimmune stuff. Even the scary ones you hope never come up in conversation. And every single time, the results came back. Negative. No answers. Just more waiting. Eventually, my doctor got more urgent about it and scheduled imaging, an ultrasound of the lymph nodes, because they weren't shrinking. They were getting bigger. And honestly, that word, urgent, does something to you. It turns the volume up in your head. The night before that appointment, I had a dream about Evan again. In the dream, I'm sitting on these bleachers at our high school football field. It's a homecoming game, Bright stadium lights, the cold air that smells like popcorn and damp grass, that whole familiar scene you don't realize your body remembers until you're suddenly back in it. To my left is Evan. To my right is another friend, Marcus. And behind me is Tessa, leaning forward between the rows like she's listening in. We're talking the way we used to, like no time has passed. And at first it feels completely normal. And then this thought hits me, sharp and clear like someone flipped a switch. You shouldn't be here. I look at Marcus like I need him to confirm I'm not losing my mind, and I whisper, kind of urgently, Do you see Evan? Marcus doesn't hesitate. He just nods like it's the most natural thing in the world and says, Yeah, I see him too. That's when I turn back, and Evan is looking straight at me. Not smiling exactly, but calm, steady, like he's trying to make sure I really hear him. And in this quiet, even voice, he says, One of you is next. No drama, no menace, just a statement. Like he was reading something off a list. And then I wake up. I woke up drenched in sweat, like my shirt was stuck to my back, and my heart was pounding so hard it felt loud in the room. It took me a minute just to remember where I was, and when I did, I felt this flood of emotions all at once. Because part of me was happy. I know that sounds strange, but it was this tiny spark of joy that I'd seen him again, that I'd heard his voice. And then the anxiety came right behind it, because what kind of dream is that? What does it mean? Why now? But the strange part is, the dream itself didn't feel dark. It felt peaceful, quiet, almost gentle. And I've always been the type to spiral. I've always been a little bit of a hypochondriac, always bracing for the worst, always terrified of death like it's a shadow waiting around the corner. But Evan's face, his calm, the way he held my gaze, did something to me. Even with those words, even with how unsettling they are on paper, the feeling he left me with was comfort. Like he wasn't there to scare me. Like he was telling me, whatever happens, you're going to be okay. The next day, I went to the ultrasound appointment like I was supposed to. And then I was back in that horrible in-between space, waiting for results, waiting to be told what's next, waiting to find out if there's a name for what's happening in my body. My doctor still didn't want to throw antibiotics at it without understanding what it was, so there wasn't even the comfort of, here, take this. Just waiting. But I'll tell you the truth. Ever since that dream, something in me has shifted a little. I'm still scared. I'm still human. I still have moments where my mind runs wild. But if my time ever really is coming, I don't think I feel the same panic I used to. That dream didn't answer my medical questions, but it softened something in my chest. It made the idea of the unknown feel just slightly less unbearable. And I don't know why that happened. I don't know what dreams are, or if they mean anything, or if grief just finds weird ways to visit you when you're vulnerable. I just know that, for the first time in a long time, I felt a little more peace than fear. Hey, can I tell you something that's been sitting heavy on my chest? So, earlier today, I got a message from someone I don't really know well. She's a classmate of my church friend, Adrian. She said, Adrian got into an accident, and then she sent a photo from the scene. And the second I saw it, my whole body reacted before my mind could catch up. My chest tightened like someone had grabbed it. I started breathing too fast, and my hands were actually trembling. It was that instant physical kind of fear, like your body knows something is wrong. And then, the memories hit me. Near the end of last year, sometime before the holidays, I had this really serious conversation with Adrian. I told him I'd had a bad dream about him. In the dream, he was out riding. He's a cyclist in real life, always on his bike. And something happened on the road. There was a collision involving a motorcycle. It wasn't vague either. It felt weirdly specific. And the part that keeps bothering me is that I remember one detail so clearly it basically glued itself to my brain. The motorcycle's color. In the dream, it was this bright teal-green shade, so distinct that when I tried to brush the dream off, that color kept flashing back at me like a warning sign. At first, I didn't even want to tell him the dream. Growing up, I always heard this thing like, don't tell bad dreams out loud or you'll give them power, you know? Like saying it makes it real. So I tried to keep it simple. I just told him, please be careful. I had a dream that scared me. But he kept asking. He wouldn't let it go. He was like, what did you see? Tell me exactly. So eventually, I told him everything. Even the color. Even the way it happened in the dream. And I remember feeling a little silly saying it out loud, but also, I couldn't ignore how real it felt to me. After that, life moved on the way it always does. The conversation faded into the background, but I didn't completely forget it. Every so often, when he'd mention going out for a ride, I'd still say, please be careful, like it was the one small thing I could do. And then, this happened. What makes it even more unsettling is that, not long ago, his dad had just helped him get his first motorcycle. He was excited about it, like this new chapter, this new freedom. And then, not long after that, the accident. When I started putting it together, the dream, the warning, the motorcycle, that specific color detail, the timing, I felt nauseous, like genuinely sick, because it lined up in a way that didn't feel random to me in that moment. It felt too neat, too matched up, like something had been set a long time ago, and I was only realizing it now. And I know how this sounds. I do. I know coincidences happen. I know our brains are pattern-making machines. I know accidents can happen to anyone, any day. But I can't shake the feeling, this crawling, lingering feeling, that my mind somehow reached forward and grabbed a glimpse of something before it happened. And now I'm stuck in this loop of questions. Am I overthinking it? Why do dreams sometimes feel so real only after something happens? And how can a dream be so specific that it makes you feel like you already lived the moment before it even arrived? I'm honestly asking because it's been weighing on me, like I'm carrying it around in my body, and I really need someone else's thoughts, because I don't want to spiral alone with this. So, this happened to me years ago, and I can still feel it in my chest when I think about it. It was one of those quiet mornings where the house feels extra still. My dad had already left for work, so it was just me and my older brother Eli at home. He was in his room doing his own thing, and I was in the kitchen putting the kettle on, just making tea, nothing special. While the water was heating up, I wandered into the living room to wait. I remember being in a genuinely good mood, like the day was wide open and I was excited for it. The house was chilly, older house, drafty windows, so I grabbed this throw blanket off the back of the couch and wrapped it around my shoulders. But when I flicked it up, it slid over my head for a second, like a hood. And the second I pulled it back down, everything changed. I was still in my dad's house technically, but it didn't look like his house anymore. The whole living room had shifted into this warm, polished, late 60s vibe, like a cozy magazine spread. Different furniture, different curtains, different little knickknacks. Even the lighting felt softer, almost golden. And the weirdest part? I wasn't on the couch anymore. I was sitting in this mustard yellow armchair across the room, like someone had picked me up and placed me there. My legs were folded under me, tucked in the way you sit when you're comfortable, except I definitely hadn't been sitting like that before. I remember this sick, crawling feeling of violation. Like, who moved me? Who put me here? I stood up fast and walked toward the kitchen, and it was different too. Cleaner, prettier, like someone actually cared about it. There was a pot on the stove with soup gently simmering, this soft little bubbling sound like someone was mid-dinner prep. The back door was open, and there was a screen door in place, letting in this cool breeze. I could hear a couple cars passing outside and birds calling, like it was a normal day in a normal neighborhood. But I didn't feel normal. I felt like I was trespassing. Then I heard something from the bathroom, a small clink, like someone setting down a bottle or a rag. And I saw a shadow move under the door. Someone inside, like they were wiping the sink or cleaning. That's when panic hit me full force. I bolted back into the living room because the last thing I wanted was for whoever that was to open the door and see me standing there like some intruder. I kept thinking, this is somebody else's house. I'm not supposed to be here. My brother's room was right off the living room, so I ran to his door and grabbed the knob, desperate for something familiar, desperate for him. And before I could even turn it, the doorknob started shaking, violently, like someone on the other side was wrenching it back and forth, angry and fast. And I heard Eli's voice right behind the door, yelling, "Stop it, you freak!" I remember shouting back, "Eli, what is happening? What's going on?" The whole door looked charged, like it was humming with energy, like the air around it had thickened. And then came these massive impacts. Boom, boom, boom. So loud it swallowed his voice completely. It sounded like something was slamming into the door from inside the room, like the wood itself was being punched. I freaked out. I ran behind the couch and dropped down into a crouch on the carpet, curling up small. I covered my head and clamped my arms over my ears, trying to shut it all out. My heart was going so hard I thought it might actually hurt me. And then, silence. And I heard Eli say, in this totally normal voice, what are you doing? Why are you hiding back there?" I lifted my head, and I was back. Back in my dad's plain living room, back on the regular couch, back in the chilly morning like nothing had happened. The curtains were the same. The furniture was the same. The whole vibe was my dad's again, bachelor clutter and all. I stood up and I was shaking so hard. I could barely breathe. My lungs felt like they'd been sprinting. Eli just looked at me like I was being dramatic, rolled his eyes, and went back into his room like I just interrupted him over nothing. Later, when my hands finally stopped trembling, I asked him what he experienced, and he told me, all annoyed and confused, that he couldn't open the door because the doorknob was shaking so hard he couldn't get a grip on it. And to this day, I don't know what happened. I just know that for a few minutes, it felt like I slipped into somebody else's life, somebody else's house, and whatever was on the other side of that door did not want me there. So, let me tell you about the house we moved into. It was late summer 2021 when my family and I finally hauled our lives into this place. An old home tucked in a sleepy little village where the roads feel like they forget you on purpose. You know the kind of place. Quiet in a way that's almost too quiet. On move-in day, we did the usual wandering around with boxes thing, trying to get a feel for everything. And that's when we got to the garage. The previous owners had always kept it locked whenever we came to view the property. They'd apparently used it as a play space, so it was off limits. We didn't think much of it at the time, until we opened it. The garage was 2 stories. The first level looked normal enough. Dusty shelves, old hooks on the walls, that faint smell of oil and cold concrete. Typical garage vibes. But upstairs? Upstairs felt wrong. The second floor had these smeared handprints all over the walls, except they weren't little kid handprints. They were big, like full-grown adult hands. And there were shoe scuffs across the floor, heavy and uneven, like someone had been pacing up there in work boots. We stood there for a minute, staring, trying to make it make sense. And eventually we did what people always do when something doesn't fit. We shrugged and told ourselves it must have been from years ago, maybe before it became a kid's play area. Old house, old marks, whatever. Except, it didn't stay whatever for long. About a month later, weird things started happening at night. At first it was small stuff, things you can easily blame on someone else without even thinking. A door closing a little too hard, the television turning itself on and off, footsteps in the hallway when everyone was supposed to be asleep. And I kept telling myself it was my sister, Lena, or my dad, Mark, because both of them are the type to randomly wake up at 2 a.m. like it's a normal hobby. Then one night, I got up to use the bathroom. The house was dark, that kind of dark where you're half asleep and your brain starts filling in shapes that aren't there. I was in the bathroom when I heard my bedroom TV click on, clear as day, and then my door slam. Like a real slam, the kind that shakes the frame. I finished up fast and walked back to my room, already annoyed, already ready to hiss, "Lena, seriously?" The second I stepped through the doorway, the TV turned off. Just dead, silent, like it had never been on. I stood there for a second, blinking, trying to force logic onto it. Power glitch, loose connection, maybe a draft caught the door. Sure, fine. So I got back into bed and rolled onto my side, facing the wall, trying to settle my heart down. And I swear to you, no exaggeration, no dramatic retelling, I felt the mattress sink beside me. Not like a little bounce, not like the house settling, like someone sat down. Then I heard this slow, tired sigh, right next to me. My whole body went cold. That instant electric fear that makes you feel like you've forgotten how to breathe. I didn't even think. I just bolted upright and basically launched myself out of the room to go find my sister, because the only thing my brain could grab onto was, please let it be Lena messing with me. And as I'm stepping into the hallway, I see my dad leaving my parents' room. He looks at me, pale, wide-eyed, and before I can even speak, he goes, "Did you just feel the bed move?" And then he tells me, calm voice but shaky, he felt the exact same thing. Mattress dipping, a presence, a sigh, like someone had sat down right beside him too. That was the moment it stopped being weird noises and became something else entirely. After that, it kept happening. Not every night, but often enough that we couldn't pretend it was nothing. Sometimes we'd hear sighing, loud, clear, like it was right inside the room with you. Once or twice it sounded like soft laughing, not cheerful laughing either. More like someone amused or mocking, like they were reacting to us. And the worst part is how normal everything would look in the daylight. Sun through the windows, kettle boiling, everyone acting like a regular family. But at night? At night, it felt like the house had a second set of lungs. Eventually, I started digging into the property's history. I figured if the village was as old as it felt, there had to be a story underneath it. Old deeds, old records, anything I could find. And what I found made my stomach flip. Years ago, way back during World War I, the house and the surrounding land had been used as a temporary holding site for German prisoners of war. Not just, someone stayed here once, history. Real, heavy history. The kind that sinks into wood and stone and doesn't fully leave. So yeah, call it whatever you want. But after everything we experienced, after hearing the sighs, feeling the mattress dip, watching doors move on their own, it stopped feeling like a bunch of coincidences. It felt like we weren't alone in that house. And honestly, even now, we still get freaked out. We've learned to laugh about it sometimes because what else can you do? But every once in a while, when the hallway creaks at the wrong time or the air feels just a little too cold, you remember that the house has a past. And sometimes it acts like it remembers it too. So, this happened a lot of summers ago, back when I was around 9 or 10, and my little sister was maybe 7. I'm in my 30s now, but I swear I can still see it like it's right in front of me. It was one of those ordinary summer evenings where nothing exciting is going on. Just dinner on the table, everyone tired in that warm weather way. And then the phone rang mid-meal, which already felt dramatic, you know? It was my mom's youngest sister, Aunt Renee, and she was all keyed up because she'd been looking at a possible investment property not far from where we lived. She wanted my mom to come by after dinner and give her opinion, like, do you think this place is worth it? My mom loved that kind of thing. She was instantly interested. And here's a detail that mattered. My mom's other sister, Aunt Valerie, happened to be over too. She visited constantly back then. So it became this whole little family field trip without anyone even meaning it to. We all crammed into my mom's minivan after dinner and drove maybe 10 or 15 minutes to the address. The light was starting to soften. Late sun, long shadows, that golden kind of glow that makes everything look calm. When we pulled up, it looked like a tidy, older bungalow, like late 70s or early 80s style. A couple big front windows, a front door with a few steps up, and a clean "for sale" sign planted right in the yard. Nothing about it looked creepy. If anything, it looked cared for. Aunt Renee had mentioned there was a really nice garden out back. Apparently the realtor had talked it up, so the grown-ups were immediately focused on that. They got out and started circling around toward the backyard like they were inspectors or something, pointing at things, talking about potential and curb appeal. My sister, Maddie, and I, being kids, were like, perfect, this is our moment. We peeled off and ran to the front of the house instead, because of course we did. And I'll be honest, I was feeling mischievous. I sprinted up the steps and started ringing the doorbell, more than once, like rapid fire. Because we'd been told the place was vacant, and in my kid brain that meant it was basically a harmless prank. Maddie was giggling behind me. I was laughing too, and then I happened to glance sideways, through those sheer, old-fashioned lace curtains, like the kind you'd see in a house from another decade. I saw someone standing right at the edge of the window. An old man. He had white hair and this straw hat on, like a cowboy hat, worn soft from use. He was dressed in faded work clothes, like old coveralls with a plaid shirt underneath. And he wasn't looking at me. He wasn't reacting at all. He was just staring out. Not even angry, not startled, just empty, heavy. What hit me wasn't fear at first. It was the sadness in his face. His eyes looked like they were waiting for something that wasn't coming. Like he was listening for someone to pull into the driveway. Like part of him still believed someone would open that door and walk in. It was such a specific kind of expression that even as a kid, I felt it in my stomach. I froze for half a second. Then my whole body snapped into panic. I bolted down the steps, grabbed Maddie, and we ran straight around to the backyard, talking over each other like, there's someone inside. There's an old man in there. The house isn't empty. My mom and aunts immediately went from casual to alarmed, and all 4 of us hustled back to the front. We stopped outside the gate, kind of hovering there like we didn't know whether to leave or to apologize. But he didn't. No door opened, no footsteps, no voice. Nothing. Just silence. After a minute or two, we got back in the minivan, all of us talking at once. My mom and aunts half embarrassed, half unsure, and my sister and I insisting, "No, we saw him. We really did." Later that night, back home, my mom called Aunt Renee to give her thoughts. She told her the place seemed solid, and this part always sticks with me. She mentioned the backyard garden again, saying it would be a huge bonus for tenants because it looked so well kept and loved. And right before she hung up, my mom added, kind of carefully, "But I don't think the house is empty. The owner might still be living there." There was this pause on the other end, and Aunt Renee said something like, "That doesn't make sense." Because according to the realtor, the story was that the homeowner had listed it to downsize after her husband, who'd lived there for years, had recently passed away. In that house. And when my mom repeated what Maddie and I had seen, the man behind the curtains, Aunt Renee went quiet again. She never bought the place in the end. And I don't know what I believe, honestly. I just know what I saw. That lace curtain, that stillness, that face that looked like it was waiting for a life that had already moved on. And even now, thinking about it, it doesn't scare me as much as it makes me sad. So before I tell you what's been going on, I want you to know where I'm coming from. I've always had this quiet interest in paranormal stuff. Like, I'll watch the videos, read the stories, get that little chill down my spine. But I'm not the type to swear a place is haunted just because a floorboard creaks. I'm usually the person who goes, "Okay, what's the normal explanation here?" Because honestly, I've never had anything happen to me that felt truly undeniable. Until the last couple months. It started small. I'd be at home, sitting at my desk, gaming or just scrolling, headphones on, the kind that make the whole world go muffled. And out of nowhere, I'd get this heavy, unmistakable feeling. Like someone was behind me. Like I'd turn my head and catch somebody staring, except there was never anybody there. Sometimes it would hit and fade in a few minutes. Other times it would hang around for what felt like forever, like my body had decided to stay on alert for no reason. And I kept telling myself, "You're tired, you're stressed, it's anxiety, your brain is misfiring." But then my cats started doing things that made it harder to brush off. I have two of them, Miso and Juniper, and they're not usually jumpy. But every so often, they'd suddenly bolt like something spooked them. Like full-on panic, backs arched, tails puffed up, and then they'd vanish under the bed or behind the couch. And I'd be standing there like, "What? What did you see?" But there'd be nothing. No loud noise, no knocked-over object, no stray shadow I could blame it on. Again, I tried to stay reasonable. Cats are weird. Maybe they heard something I couldn't. Maybe a pipe clanged. Maybe a neighbor shut a door. Maybe. And then there was the sleep thing. I've always been a light sleeper, but lately I've been waking up way more than normal, like my eyes snap open for no good reason. What freaked me out is that it kept happening around the same times, night after night, like my body was on some eerie schedule. I'd check my phone and just stare at the clock thinking, why am I awake right now? Still, all of that could be stress. All of that could be my mind building a story out of nothing. But a few nights ago, this is the part that really got under my skin. I was at my computer after work, same routine as always. It was about 10:15 p.m., already fully dark outside. The apartment is small, so everything is close together, and their hook is this narrow spiral staircase near the front area that leads down toward the entrance. All of a sudden, both cats froze. Not in a casual way either. They went rigid and stared in the exact same direction, toward that staircase, like they were watching something move. Their ears went flat, and I saw that puffed tail fear starting up again. They looked locked in, like whatever had their attention was real enough to keep them from even blinking. And that's when I noticed it. The front door was open. Not wide open, just partially, like it had been pulled inward and left there. Enough to see the dark gap, enough to feel that immediate drop in your stomach. I swear, my whole body went cold. I got up so fast my chair practically skidded. I went down the stairs and checked the doorway, then stepped out and looked around. Nothing. But it was quiet. Empty. Like the place had been holding its breath. I went back inside and checked everything. Windows, locks, the whole routine. And the entire time, my brain kept flipping between two thoughts. Okay, calm down. The door didn't latch. You didn't close it all the way. Maybe there was a draft. And then... But why did the cats react like that? Why at the exact moment the door was open? Why does this keep happening now, when it never used to? Because that's the thing. None of it, was happening before. Not the someone's behind me feeling. Not the cats freaking out like that. Not the constant wake-ups at night. It all started only recently, like something shifted a couple months ago, and now my brain can't settle. So I'm telling you all of this because I genuinely don't know what to make of it. Do you think I'm just getting in my own head? Like subconsciously scaring myself and connecting dots that aren't really connected? Or does this sound like the kind of situation where something is actually off? Okay, so I need you to picture this place with me. It's a restaurant now, but it used to be a house. One of those original, creaky old homes from the 1800s that somehow survived long enough to get repurposed. High ceilings, narrow stairs, weird corners that don't make sense unless you remember it was built for a family, not for a dining room and a bar. And listen, I'm not someone who wants this to be a ghost story. I've worked in restaurants forever. Like, I've been in the service industry for well over a decade, and I've seen all kinds of chaos. Busy nights, drunk customers, equipment breaking, things falling because someone stacked them wrong. All of that is normal. But this place has its own brand of what the hell. At first, it was little stuff. Forks sliding off tables. A glass tipping over when nobody even brushed it. Bottles taking a dive off a shelf. And I tried so hard to be rational about it. You know, like, okay, old building, slightly uneven floors, heavy trucks going by. Easy explanations. Except the way some things move. It doesn't feel like gravity. It feels like something shoved it. Like a quick, annoyed little push. Then it started getting weirder. I'll be downstairs and swear I hear someone upstairs, like footsteps or a voice, or that muffled sound of someone shifting a chair. I'll call out, expecting my coworker to answer, and then... nothing. I'll go up there and it's empty. A couple times I've even had that split-second moment where I see someone walk into the storage room or the office, like fully convinced it was my coworker, like I'm about to follow them in. And then they're just not there. No door closing. No, oh hey. Nothing. Just me standing there feeling ridiculous. So here's the thing. I don't tell new hires about any of this. I know that sounds mean, but it's honestly the only way I can test whether I'm just feeding people ideas. Because if I say, this place is creepy, then every creak becomes a presence, right? So I keep my mouth shut. I act normal. I let them train. Give it a couple weeks, sometimes less. Someone will casually bring it up like they're trying not to sound crazy. Like Mara, one of our newer servers, came up to me after a lunch shift and said, really quietly, "Okay, I'm not trying to be weird, but do things ever, like, move on their own here? And my stomach just dropped because I hadn't told her anything. Another guy, Devin, asked me if we had some kind of prank thing going because he watched a spoon flip off a table like somebody had flicked it. He even tried recreating it, bumping the table, shifting his weight, tapping the edge, and couldn't get it to do anything close to what he saw. And it's not just staff. Customers have had stuff happen too. People laughing nervously because their utensils slid right off the table while they were mid-conversation. One couple insisted a menu moved. Not fell, not slid down from condensation. Moved like it was tugged. Now, I'm a pretty grounded person. I don't drink. I don't mess with drugs. I don't have any family history of anything that would explain hallucinations. And I've worked in enough places to know when my brain is just tired and filling in gaps. Which is why the moment I'm about to tell you still makes my skin crawl. It was quiet. Totally normal. And right as I'm turning the key, I hear a young woman's voice say my name. Not in that vague, did I imagine that way? I mean right by my ear, clear as day, like someone leaned in close to get my attention. But at the same time it sounded distant? Like it came from too near and too far at once. And she said it like a question. Like, Elena? That little upward inflection, like she was checking if it was me. I froze so hard I swear my whole body locked up, because my name isn't super common. It's not the kind of thing you overhear casually shouted on a random street. And there was no one in the alley. No one behind me. No one passing through. Nothing. I actually turned around expecting to see someone, like maybe a friend of a coworker, or a delivery person, or even just some stranger who happened to know me. But there was nobody. And that's the part that sticks with me. Not just the voice, but how personal it felt. Like whoever it was wasn't yelling into space. They were talking to me. I've been there a little over 3 years now, and I'll be honest, it makes me uncomfortable in this deep, quiet way that doesn't really go away. Sometimes I catch myself wondering things I don't even want to wonder. Like, if this house has a history, if someone young lived there and got trapped in a bad life, if something happened to her, if she was lonely, if she's just still there. And then I swing the other direction and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm stressed. Maybe I'm overtired. Maybe my brain glitched for half a second. But I keep coming back to the same thing. I've worked in a lot of places. I've had long nights. I've been exhausted, burned out, running on fumes, and I have never had this kind of stuff follow me the way it does here. So I don't know what it is. I just know that when I'm alone by that side door, keys in hand, and the alley goes quiet, I find myself listening harder than I want to, just in case she says my name again. Hey, okay. So I'm gonna tell you something that still makes my stomach drop a little when I think about it. I found an old post I wrote years ago about this, back when I was younger and honestly way more jumpy. And I thought, surely by now I'll have a normal explanation. But reading it again, I still don't. And what's strange is, I'm not someone who grew up believing in ghosts or demons or anything religious like that. I'm not trying to convince you of some big supernatural theory. I'm just telling you what happened, the way it felt in my body, and why it stuck with me. When I was a kid, I had this weird awareness. Like when I was maybe 7 or 8, I'd know my parents were coming up the steps before they actually did. Not because I heard them, more like I'd picture it in my head, and then a few seconds later, there they were. And I was freakishly good at guessing things. Not in a smart kid way, just knowing. Like, pick a number, and I'd get it right so often it stopped being fun for other people. That kind of thing faded as I got older. But then, around the time I was 10, I had my first proper nope moment. The kind you don't laugh off. It was winter, so it got dark early. Like, you'd swear it was nighttime by 5. My parents, Niall and Orla, had gone out for a couple of hours, and I was home alone, absolutely glued to my phone like a little goblin with a new toy. And the sitting room layout matters here, so just picture it with me. Long, narrow room, open plan into the kitchen at one end. Along one wall, there's this run of tall, skinny cupboards, mostly boring storage stuff. And around the far end, there's a corner that leads into this short hallway that goes to the older part of the house. The old house section. High ceilings, cold corners, that kind of vibe. One cupboard door was ajar. Not wide open, just open enough to make a weird angle. I was slouched sideways on the couch with my legs stretched out, so I couldn't really see past that cupboard into the hallway. And then I got this feeling. You know that sensation when you're a kid and you've done something wrong and you don't even remember what it is yet, but you just know you're about to be caught? Like the air goes tight? That. It hit me out of nowhere. My chest went hot, my stomach went hollow, and the room felt smaller, like it was leaning in. The second I looked up from my phone, literally the moment my eyes left the screen, the cupboard door slammed shut. Not drifted, not clicked, slapped shut like someone had thrown it. The sound echoed through the whole house. And I remember just freezing there because the force of it made no sense. All the windows were shut. No wind, no draft. And if someone had pushed it, they would have been standing exactly where I couldn't see, right around that corner in the dark hallway. The place I'd been instinctively afraid to look at in the first place. I didn't even scream. I just sat there, heart hammering, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. But I hadn't. I saw it. I heard it. The sound was too real. Then there was another one. This happened not long after, when I was around 9. My little sister, let's call her Erin, and I shared a room back then. We had these loft beds, the kind that are up high with a ladder in the middle. Her bed was above the window. Mine was closer to the door. From the doorway, you could see her bed easily, but you couldn't see into mine unless you stepped in and looked up. So I went into the bedroom and... This is the detail that still gives me chills. She wasn't in her bed. I couldn't see her anywhere from the doorway, which meant she must have been in my loft, because that was the one hidden from view. I walked to the ladder and asked, "What's wrong? Why did you call me?" And Erin goes, really serious, "You called me." I remember saying, "What?" like an idiot, because my brain just couldn't process it. She insisted she heard my voice, clear as day, telling her to come down the ladder. Not whispering, not like a noise that could be mistaken, like me saying it. And I felt something in my whole body go cold, because I'd been in the sitting room. I hadn't been anywhere near her. But she was getting worked up, so I did the only thing I could think of. I lied. I smiled and acted like I'd been messing with her, like it was a prank. I needed her out of that room, off that ladder, and out into the hallway where it felt safer. I don't know why I felt that so strongly, but I did. I got her down, shut the bedroom door behind us, and then I asked her what she heard again, exact words. She said my voice told her to come downstairs. We used to call the loft upstairs and the floor downstairs, like our own little language. She said she asked, "Why?" and "What do you want?" And when she didn't get an answer, that's when she called my name. And then I walked in from the hall. To this day, she still thinks I was messing with her. I've never been able to explain why that voice wanted her to climb down, or why it chose to sound like me. I just know I didn't like it. I didn't like the intent behind it. And then, there's the last one. The one that made me stop calling this stuff weird and start calling it real. It was summer. We were on holiday in the West, still in Ireland, but not where we normally stay. Somewhere outside a small town near the edge of woodland. I think it was County Mayo, but honestly it all blurs together now. What I remember is the house and the way the dark looked outside it. It was us, me, Aaron, our parents, and our 2 dogs. The rental house was beside a bigger one where a family lived full-time, and they had this massive dog. The back of our place faced a garden that ran right up toward trees. Past the garden was forest, thick enough that the night looked like a wall. Aaron and I slept on a pull-out sofa bed in the living room. The sofa faced a big window, straight out to the garden and the woods. Our parents were in the 1 bedroom at the front. It was around midnight. I was on my phone with the brightness turned down, scrolling videos, half listening to the quiet. The kind of quiet you only get outside towns, where there's no traffic hum, just space. Then I heard something. Far away at first, deep in the woods. It didn't sound like a fox. It didn't sound like an owl. It didn't sound like any clean, natural animal call. It was like a woman moaning and an animal crying at the same time. Like something wounded. Like something trying to sound wounded. The first time, I tried to be sensible. Okay, I thought. Someone's dog, maybe. Or a deer. Something weird but normal. Then it happened again. Closer. And I can't even explain the dread that hit me, because it wasn't just, I'm scared because it's a scary noise. It was like my nervous system recognized it before my brain did. My skin went prickly. My throat tightened. It felt like my body was preparing to run, but there was nowhere to run to. I nudged Aaron and whispered, "Can you hear that?" And then it came again, closer still. The sound moved like it had direction, like it was coming toward us. That's the part that makes it hard to dismiss, you know? If it was just a random animal calling, it would have stayed in one place, or wandered, or faded. This didn't. It would cry out, and then cry out again, and every time it did, it was nearer. Within minutes, it wasn't deep in the woods anymore. It was in the garden. And then, it was right outside the window. Maybe 3 meters away, 10 feet, just on the other side of glass. I started crying without even meaning to. Silent tears, the kind where you're trying not to make noise because you don't want whatever it is to know you're awake. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I remember pressing my thumb into my palm like it could anchor me. The sound up close wasn't clearer. It was wronger. It had this strained, almost deliberate quality, like something imitating pain, like it had learned the shape of a human wail but didn't have the right mouth for it. There was a rough, scratchy edge, almost like static, like the sound was tearing at itself. And then it let out a shriek that I swear I'd only ever heard in horror films. Not a quick yelp, not a bark, a long, heart-stopping scream that made my chest seize like I'd been punched. The thing is, our dogs didn't bark, not even a low warning. The neighbor's huge dog didn't bark. Aaron didn't really wake up. It was like the whole world stayed unnaturally still except for that sound. And I just lay there, staring at the dark window, feeling like something was choosing to be heard by me, like it wanted the fear, like it wanted me to know it was there. After it stopped, the silence felt even worse, like the quiet was listening. Erin has no memory of any of it. She'll blink at me when I bring it up and act like I'm talking about a dream. But I wasn't asleep. I know the difference. I was wide awake, crying, shaking, fully conscious, counting seconds between each scream like that would somehow make it logical. And even now, years later, that's the part I can't make peace with. It wasn't just a sound that scared me. It was the feeling that came with it, that dread that hit instantly, before I even had time to think. Like something in me recognized something in it. I don't know what it was. I'm not saying it was a banshee or some mythological thing. I'm not trying to dress it up. I just know it came from the woods. It moved closer in a straight line. It stopped right outside the window, and it screamed like it wanted to peel the fear right out of my chest. And I know this. If I ever hear it again, if I ever hear that sound moving toward me in the dark, I won't be able to pretend I'm imagining it. Not for a second. Hey, yeah. I'm sorry if this comes out messy. I'm trying to sound calm, but honestly, I feel like I'm right on the edge of losing it, and I just need to tell someone who will actually listen. So, context. I'm Ethan, I'm 36, married, no kids. My wife, Nadia, and I grew up in different religious backgrounds, and I need you to understand. I used to be the guy who rolled his eyes at anything paranormal. Ghosts, spirits, witchcraft. My brain filed all of that under movies and superstition. Except, we lived in a house that changed that. It wasn't ancient or anything, maybe built in the late 80s, but it had this weight to it. At first it was subtle. Nadia started saying she felt uneasy there. Not, I don't like the paint color, uneasy. More like, I don't feel safe turning my back to the hallway, uneasy. Then the weird stuff started stacking up. She'd hear footsteps on the stairs when she was home alone, more than once, like someone pacing, slow and deliberate. She started having nightmares, really vivid, disturbing ones. She told me she'd wake up feeling like someone was breathing right next to her, on the side of the bed where I wasn't. And then there was this one thing she said that made my skin crawl. In her dream, we'd be intimate, and halfway through, my face would shift. Like it wasn't me anymore, like something was wearing me. She'd wake up furious at me, like I'd betrayed her in real life. And I'd be standing there going, "What are you talking about? I was asleep." I tried to rationalize it. Stress, sleep paralysis, anxiety, anything. But then her brother, Malik, came over one night, and later he told us he saw a dark figure near the staircase. He's not dramatic. He's not a prankster. He looked genuinely shaken. And the same day, our dog, usually the friendliest, dumbest little ball of joy, refused to come inside, like planted his paws and pulled back, trembling. I had to carry him in, and even then he fought me like the house was a burning building. Not long after that, Nadia got sick. Really sick. Severe vertigo that dragged on for months. She couldn't function without medication. Some days she could barely sit up without the room spinning. I watched my wife turn into someone exhausted and scared, and I still kept telling myself, this can't be the house. And then one day she said something that hit me hard. She said, "Do you smell that? It's like something rotten." I smelled nothing, not even a hint, but she kept insisting it was everywhere, especially near certain rooms. And here's the thing, I'm a horror movie addict. I know what the only one person can smell it trope is. That's usually when you're supposed to start praying or running. We stayed with my parents for a few days just to get her out of there. And with their help, we found a woman. Someone people described as a spiritual healer, a medium, whatever you want to call it. She came to the house. Didn't even hesitate. She told us it felt occupied, heavy, like something had attached itself. She did a cleansing. Prayers, incense, the whole thing. And then she prayed over Nadia and me. And I swear to you, right after that, Nadia's vertigo eased, like someone turned off a switch. Within hours, she was moving around like herself again. The next day, she was cleaning the house, wiping counters, opening windows, like she hadn't spent months struggling to stand. I just stood there, stunned. Because what do you do with that? Where do you put it in your brain? For a while, it actually felt normal. Then slowly, little things came back. Nadia started having nightmares again. And then this streak of bad luck hit her hard. She lost a job she'd had for nearly a decade. She found another one quickly, but it turned toxic fast, and she was pushed out. Long story, but basically office politics, and someone with power who decided they didn't like her. She's been unemployed for about a year now, and it's crushed her confidence. Around that same time, she started saying she felt a presence in the new house. Not seeing anything, just that feeling of being watched, like the air behind you is occupied. And both of us, we were drained, constantly, like our batteries couldn't charge. I started skipping work. I used all my leave and then some. I'd come home and collapse like I'd been hauling bricks all day, even when I'd barely done anything. Then one day we found something on our gate, red candle wax smeared near the lock, and nearby, little bits of stuff that looked intentional, like someone left it there on purpose. Not trash, not random, more like a message. It happened again later. Candles again, signs of someone doing something right outside our place. That's when we had this moment of, okay, we've been coasting spiritually. Because for a long time we weren't really practicing either of our religions consistently. Life got busy, then stressful, then heavy, and prayer became this thing we did someday. So we decided to stop drifting. We did house blessing prayers, kind of a housewarming ritual, but spiritual. And after that, the atmosphere genuinely felt lighter, like the air could breathe again. We started praying every single day. No breaks, no excuses. We also installed cameras outside, and that created a problem with our neighbors. They accused us of recording into their yard, which we weren't. But the relationship turned sour almost overnight. And that was strange because before that we'd been friendly. Barbecues, little outings, casual chats. Suddenly it was cold looks and silence. For a few months things felt steadier. Not perfect, but better. And then, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, it shifted again. Nadia's nightmares returned. Not just occasional bad dreams, the kind where she wakes up tense and afraid, like she's been running for her life. Malik started having nightmares too, about us. He's always been kind of sensitive, like he picks up on moods and energy more than most people. He told us he dreamed that Nadia and I were in trouble, that people, or something, was trying to split us apart. Nadia started feeling that presence again. So last November, Malik took us to see an Anglican priest. We sat in this quiet church office and tried to explain everything without sounding insane. The priest listened carefully and then said something that made my stomach drop. He believed something sexual and parasitic might be involved. He used the words incubus and succubus. He said sometimes things attach themselves through fear, trauma, obsession, vulnerability, and they feed on conflict and intimacy. He prayed over us, and when I say prayed, I mean it felt intense, like a spiritual intervention. Malik later told me that during the prayers, he heard a low growl behind us, and that the priest actually glanced toward the sound like he'd noticed it too. Nadia felt better afterward, but only for a few weeks, and ever since then, intimacy has been complicated. Not just emotionally, like physically blocked. Here's what's happening now, and this is where I start to feel really scared. Nadia struggles to fall asleep, and when she does, she has nightmares constantly. Last week, we finally had a quiet moment where it felt like, okay, tonight. And I got sick out of nowhere. This weekend, we tried again. Saturday night, Nadia's stomach turned. Then the next night, she got this intense pain running through her arms and shoulders, like her body was warning her. And I know how this sounds, but it genuinely feels like there's an invisible wall between us, like something doesn't want us close. We've started fighting over nothing again. Little comments turn into arguments. We'll look back after and go, why did we even do that? I'm exhausted all the time. no motivation. I drag myself to work, and by the time I'm home, I'm empty. And then this morning, this is the part I haven't even told Nadia yet. I was in the bathroom, getting ready for work, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw something, like a pale, white, shadowy figure, move out of our bedroom. Not a full person, not a clear shape, but definitely not a trick of light. It moved with intention, like it walked. I froze. I stared, and it was gone. I know what denial feels like. I've been living in it for years. This didn't feel like imagination. So now I'm sitting with all these questions that I never thought I'd ask seriously. Did something follow us from the old house? Is this something new? Is someone doing something to us, like actual witchcraft? And I hate even thinking this, but could it be the neighbors? Could it be resentment, jealousy, spite? And then there's this other fear I can't shake. Are couples like us, coming from different religious backgrounds, more vulnerable spiritually? Like, does that create cracks something can slip through? I don't know. I really don't. I just know I'm scared, and I'm tired, and I want my wife to sleep peacefully again. I want our home to feel like ours, and I want to stop feeling like something is sitting just outside the edge of the room, waiting for us to fall apart. Okay, so I want to tell you something that's been true in my family for as long as anyone can remember, especially on my mom's side. For generations, the women in our line have been sensitive. Like, we pick up on energy in a way that isn't just a vibe. It's more like hearing a frequency other people can't hear. Some of us have had dreams that end up being real later. Some of us have seen things. Some of us have had moments where you feel a presence so clearly, it's like someone stepped into the room and never bothered to announce themselves. And I know how that sounds. Trust me, I'm not telling you this lightly. This is just my normal. On paper, it's kind of interesting. My dad's family is from southern Italy, near a town where old stories about folk witches are practically stitched into the culture. And my mom's side is French-Canadian, and they had their own version of light work, herbal remedies, prayer traditions, and quiet rituals that were never called witchcraft out loud, but kind of lived in that same neighborhood. But the real center of all of this, the thing that makes my stomach tighten even when I'm just thinking about it, is my mom's childhood house. It's in a small town in Connecticut, and it's old, built in the early 1900s by immigrant families. From the outside, it looks like a normal, slightly tired house, but inside, it doesn't feel like a house the way other houses do. It feels like a place with layers, like the air has memory, like something about the land is open. And I don't mean open like welcoming. I mean open like a door that never fully shuts. There are crawl spaces, weird little sealed-off corners, a third floor that's basically been left untouched for years because my grandma can't climb up there anymore. And on top of that, this is important, my grandma became a heavy antique collector over the years. It started harmless, like, oh, that's a beautiful old piece. But it slowly turned into something closer to hoarding. Rooms filled with objects, jewelry, old dolls, statues, trinkets from different cultures, things she picked up at fairs, estate sales, flea markets, all with their own history, their own residue. And I really believe objects carry energy. Some things feel neutral. Some things feel warm. Some things feel loud. That house is loud. The other day, I went there with my mom. We ended up going up to the third floor, where everything feels heavier, like the air is thicker. And I remember standing there and having this familiar sensation creep in. That same feeling I used to get as a kid, like someone was just a step behind me. Not touching me, not speaking, just present. And being in that house always puts me in this weird place emotionally, too. It's like the dysfunction in that side of the family gets amplified there. It's disorienting. like your brain can't fully settle. Anyway, there are a handful of moments that sit in my mind like stones. I'll tell you a few, because they're the ones I keep circling back to. The first one started as a dream. When I was little, I had this incredibly vivid dream that my mom's childhood bedroom was completely infested with ladybugs. Not one or two. I mean everywhere, covering the walls, the bedding, the corners. And I could hear the buzzing like it was right next to my ears. It felt so real that when I woke up, I still had that sensation of being in the room. Years later, I found out something that made my skin prickle. My mom's room actually had been infested with ladybugs at one point, and that was around the time she said the house was the most active. So then you have my mom and her sister, when they were teenagers, who were so scared in that house that they started sleeping together in the same bedroom, which, ironically, was one of the most active rooms. And look, I know people have all kinds of explanations for things, but when you hear someone tell you a story like that, and you can see the fear still living behind their eyes decades later, it's hard to dismiss. Now here's the part that happened recently. Toward the end of our visit, I started feeling that someone is with us sensation again. Like the temperature in the room changed, like I could feel a tension on me. My grandma wanted to show me this old book that's been in the house forever, and she swears she can't get rid of it. Like she's thrown it away and it shows back up again, back in the house, or somehow in the trash like it never left. The book is disturbing. It's a wartime photo book, graphic images, written like a soldier's perspective. And it's tied, in my grandma's mind, to the first family that lived in the house. There's always been this ugly whisper around that family, like they weren't just some people who lived there, but people who brought something dark with them. And here's the thing, my family is Jewish on one side, Christian on the other. So there's an extra layer of discomfort there that I can't fully put into words. It feels personal in a way I don't want it to. I turned to my grandma, but directly, and asked her, "Are they still here?" And she looked at me like she knew exactly what I meant. And she said, almost under her breath, "He wouldn't dare." The second she said that, I opened the book, and this loose cabinet door nearby just fell off its hinges and hit the floor. Not a slow slip, not a gentle creak, a drop, like something punctuated the moment. I didn't even think. I just looked right at the space I felt it coming from and said out loud, "Do not follow me. You are not welcome." Then, because I don't always make the gentlest choices when I'm trying to confirm what I already know, I asked my grandma if I could step into her bedroom. The second I crossed the threshold, I felt it. Sadness. Heavy, weighted sadness. Not like someone had a bad day sadness, more like grief that's been steeping there for years. And I looked into one corner, and I just knew someone was there. Not with my eyes, with that inner sense that goes cold and sharp. I said, "Mom, someone's here." And right after I said it, we heard a plastic bag in the corner crinkle, like a hand grabbed it. And then it slid, slowly, dragging down from where it was resting, like something was pulling it just to let us know it could. All three of us, me, my mom, my grandma, said some version of, "Get out," and the movement stopped. The last story I want to leave you with is from my mom's childhood, and it's almost eerily simple. Her sister had a foil balloon, one of those shiny ones, that was already deflated. It was in that same active bedroom. One day, they were all sitting in the living room with friends, and the balloon just floated out of the bedroom. Not blown by wind, not kicked. It wafted out like it had somewhere to be. My grandma stood up immediately, calm, firm, and said, "All right, everyone, come on. We're stepping outside." She led them to the back door, held the balloon there like it was something she was escorting, and said, clear as day, "You cannot be here. You are not allowed in my house. You need to leave." She opened the door, and the balloon dropped straight down. Just dropped. Like whatever was holding it up let go. So that's what I'm dealing with. And it's not just ghost stories, you know? It's layered. It feels generational. It feels like trauma and pain live in the walls and the objects and the family dynamics all at once. Like everything is tangled together, and I'm not walking into this unprotected. I have my own practices. I've cleansed myself. I know how to ground. I know how to close things off. But I also know I'm going to have to face this more directly one day. When the time comes to clean that house out. When the time comes to decide what stays, what goes, what gets handled carefully. And I don't just want to react. I want to understand what this part of me is and how to approach it without getting pulled under by it. Because I can feel it. That house isn't just haunted. It feels like a doorway somebody left open a long time ago. And I'm trying to figure out what it means to finally, gently, firmly close it. So, I grew up not too far from the Bay Area, and there's this day from when I was a kid that still sticks to me in a way I can't fully explain. I must have been around 11 or 12. My dad, his name was Ray, decided we should take a little day trip. We started near the water up in Benicia, by this ferry landing or dock area. I can't swear it was exactly Benicia, but it was somewhere around there. One of those places where the air smells like salt and metal and old wood. And I remember the sea lions. Not just a couple, a whole noisy crowd of them, barking like they owned the place. It was loud enough that you had to lean in when you talked, and I remember Ray being weirdly cheerful about it, like the chaos was part of the fun. His real goal, though, wasn't the waterfront. He wanted to show me this old, historic building that was just a short walk away, something courthouse-related. In my memory, it was described as one of the earliest courthouses in California. The building itself had this worn, interesting look to it, like it had stories baked into the walls. At the time, it was operating as a small museum. Inside, it was pretty simple. Old legal books, maybe a gavel or two, brittle-looking documents in glass cases, stuff that felt important but also kind of quiet, like a place that expected you to whisper. It wasn't huge. You could wander through and be done in 10 minutes if you weren't trying to stretch it out. But the part I remember most wasn't even the courthouse. Behind it, off to one side, there was this cabin. The courthouse sat on a tidy little lot, trimmed grass, clean paths, that kind of thing. But the cabin looked like it had been left behind by time. It was surrounded by overgrowth, like the plants were slowly trying to swallow it. There was a waist-high wooden fence around it, faded and rough. I drifted over there while Ray hung back talking with the guide, maybe 15 or 20 yards behind me. I can still picture him, hands in his pockets, nodding like he was genuinely interested. He always did that. He could make any stranger feel like what they were saying mattered. The guide mentioned something about the cabin having housed an important early political figure. If I remember right, she said it was connected to one of the first state senators. I didn't care much at the time. I was a kid. I was just sort of there. I leaned on the fence and stared at the cabin's front door. The door had a screen, like one of those old screen doors that clacks when it closes. The porch sat a little higher than the ground, so the doorway was elevated above where I stood. And while I was staring, someone stepped into view behind the screen. An older woman. I only saw her from about the chest up, but everything about her looked wrong in a very specific way. Not scary movie wrong, just off. Her clothing looked old-fashioned, like something out of a pioneer show. Not costumey exactly, just dated. And the light around her, or maybe the dimness inside the cabin, made her look kind of gray, like the color had been drained out of her. But the thing that really got me was the way she looked at me. She lifted her chin and stared down over her nose, like I'd interrupted her. It wasn't curious. It wasn't friendly. It felt sharp, almost like being sized up. And I remember this clear, instinctive thought in my kid brain. Why is she looking at me like that? I did what kids do when something doesn't make sense. I looked for an adult to confirm reality. I turned my head and called out to the guide. I didn't shout, but I spoke loud enough to be heard. Are there supposed to be people in there? And I swear to you, the moment she said it, I turned back, ready to point, ready to say, "Then who is that?" And the woman was gone. Just gone. No movement, no sound, no door opening, no footsteps on the porch. 1 second she was there behind the screen, looking down at me like I didn't belong. And the next second, there was nothing but a dark, empty doorway. I didn't tell anyone. Not that day. Partly because I didn't want to sound dumb. Partly because the feeling it gave me was so strange I didn't even know how to put it into words. And partly because I think some part of me was afraid that if I said it out loud, it would become more real. Years later, I asked Ray about that trip, just casually like, "Hey, do you remember that old courthouse museum we went to? The one with the cabin behind it?" And he didn't. Not even a little. That's what bothers me sometimes, how vivid it is for me, and how completely it slid off his memory like it never happened. Every now and then I'll do a quick search, poke around online, try to figure out exactly where we were. I've never done a full deep dive, but I've tried enough to realize my memory is fuzzy on the details. Waterfront town north of the bay, an early courthouse museum, a cabin behind it, sea lions raising hell nearby. And honestly, I still feel curious. Not in a dramatic way, just in this quiet, human way. Like, I'd love to find the place again, stand by that fence, look at that screen door, and find out if anyone else ever saw a woman in there too. Okay, so I've kind of always been the spirit-sensitive one in my family, you know? Like, I'm the one who notices weird vibes, gets a gut feeling, believes there's something beyond what we can see. And that's not really the vibe in my house. We're Christian, we pray, we do the whole church thing. But my family is very much that's your imagination whenever I bring anything up. I've lived in the same house since I was about 6. I'm 19 now. And between maybe 9 and 13, that house did some things to me. Not a creaky floorboard things, like real moments that still make my stomach drop when I think about them. There are 2 nights that stand out so clearly, it's like my body remembers them before my brain even catches up. The first one happened when I was around 10. My parents and my little brother, Miles, were in my parents' bedroom upstairs, just hanging out. I remember feeling thirsty, so I went down to the kitchen to grab a bottle of water. And I need you to understand something about me. I have always hated the dark. Not a cute, ooh, spooky hate. Like, my skin crawls, my heart races, I feel wrong in it. So whenever I'm downstairs at night, I turn off the light and I basically sprint back up the stairs like the darkness is chasing me. Normally, I'd flip the downstairs light from the top of the stairs before I went down, because there's a switch that makes it easier. But for some reason that night, I didn't. I don't know why, I just didn't. So I went down, got the water, and when I started back up, the whole downstairs was pitch black. By the time I reached the landing and headed toward my parents' room, my fear had already started rising. I could feel it in my chest, like that tight, buzzing panic. And then, when I grabbed the doorknob to my parents' room, it wouldn't open. Like the knob turned weird, like it was jammed, like someone on the other side was holding it, or it was stuck in a way it shouldn't be. I tried again, harder, nothing. And the darker it felt around me, the more my brain went, okay, they're messing with you. It's a prank. They're trying to scare you. So I started whisper yelling, like, stop, open the door. And then I started shaking the handle, actually getting angry. But right when I was at that point where panic turns into full body shaking, I heard a laugh. Not from inside the room, not down the hall, right in my ear. Like someone leaned in and laughed beside my head. This low, ugly, satisfied kind of laugh that made my whole body lock up. I swear to you, I went completely still. I couldn't even breathe for a second. Then I shoved the door with both hands, like pure instinct, and it swung open immediately. Smooth, easy, like it had never been stuck at all. I stumbled into the bedroom like I'd been chased. My parents and Miles looked up at me like I was being dramatic, and I was like, who did that? Why did you hold the door? And they all just stared. My mom was like, what are you talking about? My dad was like, we didn't even hear you. Why did you take so long? And the thing is, they weren't acting. They weren't hiding smiles. They weren't doing that "we got you" thing. They genuinely had no idea what I meant. That was the first time I ever thought, okay, maybe I'm not crazy, and maybe something is actually happening in this house. But every time I said anything, it got brushed off. It's the house settling. You're overthinking. You have a big imagination. And honestly, after a while, I started trying to believe them. Especially because my brain is busy all the time. I have ADHD, and sometimes it's like my mind generates extra noise, thoughts, echoes, random sounds that feel almost real. So I'd tell myself, you're probably mixing things up. You're fine. Then came the second night. This one was later. Maybe I was 12 or 13. It was nighttime again, and for some reason, I decided to change my clothes downstairs in the living room. I don't even know why I chose there. It was one of those decisions that makes no sense later, but at the time, I didn't think anything of it. The layout downstairs is kind of open. The living room connects to the dining area, and that connects into part of the kitchen, like one long rectangle that's split into 3 spaces. Each space has its own light, though, so if the living room light is on, you can sort of see into the dining room, but the kitchen stays shadowy unless you turn its light on too. So I'm in the living room, changing, and I hear this sound. At first, it's subtle, like I'm not sure if it's real. It's a deep, slow, heavy breathing sound, like someone breathing through their mouth on purpose, like they're standing still and just pulling air in and out loudly. I froze with my shirt half on, and I remember thinking, nope, brain noise, not real. So I tried the trick I always used. I started focusing on something else. I think I even hummed a little song to myself, like, okay, ignore it and it'll go away. But it didn't go away. So I covered my ears with my hands, and the breathing got muffled, meaning it was real. My heart dropped. I turned toward the kitchen, but from where I stood, it was mostly dark. I couldn't see much. The living room light lit part of the dining room, but the kitchen was this black patch beyond it. So I stepped into the dining room, slow, trying to be brave, trying to convince myself it was nothing. And from there, I could see more. Not clearly, just enough. And that's when I saw it. A silhouette, a man-shaped figure. Not like a shadow from furniture, like a person's outline. Standing, or kind of rocking, like he was shifting his weight back and forth, almost pacing in place, but not walking anywhere. Just moving like he couldn't stay still. and the breathing was coming from him. That's what wrecked me the most. The fact that the sound matched the shape. Like it wasn't random noise anymore. It had a source. I didn't scream. I didn't call out. I didn't even think. I just ran. I bolted up the stairs so fast I almost tripped, and I slammed my bedroom door like that could protect me from whatever I'd just seen. When I told my family, nobody believed me. Not even a little. They treated it like I'd watched something scary and freaked myself out. But I know what I saw. And ever since then, nothing that intense has happened again. But the smaller things still pop up sometimes. Little moments where the house feels too aware, too present, like it's listening. And I don't know what any of it means. I don't even know if it means anything at all. I just know those 2 nights changed the way I feel in the dark forever. And sometimes I still catch myself moving faster through the hallway, even now. Like some part of me is expecting that laugh again, or that breathing.